I'd like to call this committee of the whole meeting for Monday, January the 15th to order. Before we begin, I'd like to welcome our Area D Director, Director Russell. We also have in our staff table the CAO from Regional District, Mark Anderson. Welcome. Okay, let's begin. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Councillor Tripp, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Item 2B, Council Workshop, Budget Process Overview. The capital budget presentations by management are directly following the Committee of the Whole meeting. Moving on to our registered petitions and delegations. First off, we have the funding request for coordination and implementation of Kettle River Watershed Management Plan. Jessica Mace, the coordinator, Kettle River Watershed Authority. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Thanks.
Yes, it took a while. The roads aren't that good.
What was that comment over there? Right. Okay, so what's that? Yeah, I think the audio's on. Yeah? Oh, there's no audio.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, no, there's no audio on the You're the audio. Okay, so my name's Jessica Mace. I'm the coordinator for the Kettle River Watershed Authority. And this is my co-worker, Nicole McCallum, who works with me. So I think I just have 10 minutes, so I'm going to try and be succinct. So I'll give a little background information. Rolly Russell is going to help me with that because he's been there from I think pretty well from the beginning. And then I'm going to talk about the work that we've done in 2017, what's going on in the watershed, including, of course, the flood and the drought that happened in the past year, and kind of what the work is that we've done. And then I'll talk a little bit about the plans for 2018. So I'm not going to speak to each of these points just because it is a limited time, and well, you can ask Rolly. We had a presentation together once that was supposed to be 15 minutes. I said I'll do 10, you do 5. I spoke for 14. He had 1 left. So I won't do that today. I'll keep it short. But if you have any questions, after I can touch on these things. So basically on this slide, what you can see here is the big black outline is the Kettle River Watershed. And to orient yourself, the blue, so the different colors are actually sub-watersheds. They divide a watershed into sub-watersheds, or sub-basins. So to orient yourself, over here is Grand Forks in the blue, and Christina Lake is there, the big long lake. So you can see that Christina Lake and Grand Forks are in the same watershed. If we look up to right around number 2 here, that is up around Big White. So you can see the watershed's quite large, right? It starts up at Big White in the headwaters. When the snow melts up at Big White, it drains into the Kettle, which runs through the Christian Valley, and then also into the West Kettle, which runs along beside the highway. Those 2 rivers meet up north of Rock Creek. I'm sure lots of you know this, but I thought just to get us started here, thinking about the watershed and how big it is. And then it follows down to Midway. It goes down in through the U.S., back up at Grand Forks, basically, and across to Christina Lake. And then it feeds down and eventually drains into the Columbia River. Okay, I'll pass it over to Rolly.
Yes.
Thanks, Jessica. I'll be really quick with this part. Just in terms of a little bit of history. So the Kettle River Watershed Management Plan came about a handful of years ago, and in 2014 was endorsed by both the City of Grand Forks as well as the Regional District. That plan contains a list of 59 different actions that are things that are recommended that we entertain and we complete. And so some of those things have been completed already. Some of those things have yet to be initiated. In 2016, through the Kettle River Watershed Authority, that year we focused on trying to identify what the best strategy for governance was. So how do we best govern over that watershed plan and oversee the implementation of those pieces. And one of the main highlights that came out of that, or the key parts I would say that came out of that, is really trying to recognize the value and make sure that we can capitalize on the value of a collaborative approach among our various local governments throughout the boundaries. So the notion being that if we have a collaborative approach and we can demonstrate that at a provincial level, for example, that we will have a lot more traction in terms of having that local control over our watershed management. And so that's pretty much all that I will say at this point. I have to entertain questions afterwards. So the funding so far for the project has been predominantly from the rural areas, with some contributions from the City of Grand Forks and the municipalities over the years. So I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, so now I will just talk a little bit about what happened in the watershed over the past year and the work that we did. This I find interesting slide. What the black is average snowpack over a year. So, and then the green line here is 2017. And so what happened in 2017, and I guess why the flood caught us off guard, was because the snowpack was normal right until April, and basically it started raining in April, right? Everyone remembers probably it rained, it snowed, and it snowed at Big White, I think, every night in May, they said. And so all that precipitation led to an increase in the snowpack, which led to, all that water melting, and then we had the flood after that. So that's just to show that you need to almost prepare even when you don't know that it's coming. So to be prepared is important. And this is a couple photos in Johnson's Flats of the flooding that happened down there. And I'll just talk a minute about what we did during the flood. There was an emergency response team up at the regional district office. The city was there, the regional district, the fire chief, and they were all like crazy busy because there was flooding here and there was flooding in Greenwood. Their street was collapsing. There's a lot going on, and so there wasn't a lot of people on the ground. But Nicole lives in this neighborhood, for good or for bad, I guess. But she was able to talk to people, and what they really wanted was somebody on the ground there that they could speak to. Stuff was being put out by the regional district online, but a lot of people don't go online or don't feel comfortable, whatever. So we were able to go to these neighborhood meetings and speak with people, and we were received really well. People were really appreciative, and we passed on, various information. So I think that was something that we tried to do that was helpful. And then I'll move right into the drought. So of course we know we had the flood last year, and then we also had the drought. So the main thing, I guess, that happened last year, again, was it was really reactionary too, right? Like, it wasn't expected because we had the big flood in the spring. You don't expect it. You're not really prepared for it. The province really didn't give us any, notice. They didn't really talk to us. They hadn't kind of pulled us into their meetings yet. And then finally in August, the province had actually put the Kettle River watershed on a level 3 drought by the middle of August, but they didn't tell us, right? There was no, and I mean, the reason they didn't tell us, they said, was because they were so busy with the forest fires that they didn't have time, basically, or the capacity. But if we knew about it earlier, we could have done something about it. And so basically we kind of caught up to them eventually, and once we did catch up to them, we were invited to participate in kind of these provincial drought calls. And that's when we called, like Graham participated with me on the call, and then we were able to promote that right away to the community and to get people to conserve water, and think about, we are in a drought, we need to cut back. And so also I just wanted to mention that through social media, we put stuff on our Facebook page, and we got over 3,600 hits on those drought posts. And then I know Graham was on the radio, we were in the newspaper, like between the city and the regional district, I really think we reached a lot of people, which was great. Most people that I talked to, knew about it already, it wasn't something new. And I guess the biggest problem that happened was, of course, we weren't plugged in earlier, and that's what we are expecting from getting this drought response plan in place, but I'll talk about that in a minute. The other work that we did over the past year, I know you guys were wondering about that because Frank mentioned that to me, that you were, I was like, what do those guys do up there? So we respond to, I feel like, to emergencies, but then we also are trying to do just general public engagement and education. So we were at education booths across the boundary, and 4 in Grand Forks, but also Rock Creek, Christina Lake, reaching out to people, and people really have questions like that. We're talking about the watershed, we might be talking about how much you should water your grass, or what you can do to cut back during the drought. It's all different things. So I think it's good for us to be out there, and people have, again, like a face that they can talk to and ask questions to. The other thing that we did was tried to help people get their wells license. So under the new Water Sustainability Act, you need to get your groundwater license, or you need to apply for a license. So basically we ran workshops, and those were well attended, and people were able to walk away, their wells, they had their application in, so I think that was successful. And now I'll just talk about what we're planning for the next year. Over this next year, we, like I mentioned, we want to get this regional drought response plan in place. And the key to it is that it's a coordinated response. And this is what the province has really expressed to me that they want to see. They want to see, because I know the city of Grand Forks has, a drought plan in place, and you guys have different things that you do, but they really want to see it on a regional level, and so that's what we are trying to do here. And the other key thing with it is that we don't want somebody in Kamloops and someone in Penticton calling us to tell us that we're in a drought. To me, I was like, we don't need them to tell us. We know, right? We know when the water's low. So through this drought plan, we can develop our own local triggers. When is the water too low, and what are we going to do about it? And then anyway, there I just want to show the funding is really wide ranging. That we've had lots of people committed to it and want to be a part of it. So that's great. Here, this picture is pretty interesting. I find it's Boundary Creek in September. Just how it completely dried up in parts. And then the last part that I'll touch on is just the flood preparedness outreach. That is something else that we would like to work on this year. And we were, thinking it would be a great thing to have a partnership between the city, the regional district, and the Real Estate Foundation is a granting organization. So this is kind of the perfect sort of work that they will provide a grant for. So but only about 50%. So if we can get funds in place, committed, then we can leverage that and get the grant, hopefully. So, and this is where the request kind of comes in for $5,000 for program development. So that would be really to make sure the city, the regional district, that everyone's happy with what we're going to produce. And then the $10,000 would be for the actual implementation of the program. That's it. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Just a question on the private wells. They have to be licensed. There will likely be some that won't apply for a license. How do you intend to handle those situations?
Yeah, so it's not, For one, it's not domestic well owners, so households don't have to apply for a license, so that's key, right? So it's more, they're looking at the bigger users, the people that irrigate their crops or have a business where they use a lot of water, so they really want the non-domestic people to get their wells licensed. I guess the best thing that's happened is they extended the deadline. They had a deadline set for the end of 2017, and you were going to have to pay an application fee after that. But anyway, now, so they've extended that deadline. You don't have to pay an application fee, which is great, so it's still free to apply. You will have to pay an annual fee, but the annual fee generally has only been about $50, so people aren't too unhappy with that. I think they were worried it was going to be more. But yeah, we are going to try and reach out to people as much as possible over the next year. We have a deadline now of March 1st, 2019. Yeah.
Thank you, because that wasn't clear on the domestic.
Yes.
To me, it wasn't clear.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Councillor Butler and then Director Russell.
Thanks, Jessica. I enjoyed speaking with you the other day and hearing your presentation as well. And I think it's awesome that we're helping people to register their wells, because it's something that's been implemented by the provincial government with not a lot of support for people on how to do it. And from what you've told me, it was quite an onerous process. People were taking up to 2 to 3 hours online and not really knowing how to walk through it. So these workshops, I'm sure, have been very helpful for people. I would like to see the provincial government paying for those workshops, because they're the ones implementing the program, and they need to provide the funding for the program that they're implementing. Which brings me to my question. With your Kettle River Watershed Authority and the implementation of this program, where did the funding come from originally for this, and where are your funding sources coming from now? It looks like, from what you presented, that the $15,000 is just for the flood response plan, and I'm wondering, is there other funding to complete the drought management plan?
The drought management plan, I think that we have enough funding in place now. From the water suppliers are providing a bit, and then the city and the community forest in Greenwood and Midway, they're trying to support some environmental projects around water or whatever, and then the gas tax funds from the regional district are kind of bumping up the rest of that. So we'll be able to complete that with the money we have in place, or committed, I guess. But do you mean historically where the money has come from, or just for this year coming up?
Yeah, historically and ongoing. There's other points to the Kettle River Watershed Management Plan for implementation that Rolly talked about, and I'm just wondering, as we move forward, where you see that funding coming from.
Do you want to talk?
Sure. So historically, since the beginning of when the concept was first hatched, in terms of like the technical reports and so on, the bulk of that funding has come from through the rural areas, through gas tax funding. And so I don't know, Mark might have a better sense than me in terms of the specific breakdown, but over the span of the last 8 years, it would be on the order, there's been hundreds of thousands of dollars that have gone into it, and I think probably about 60,000, give or take, has come from municipalities, and the remainder of that has come from the gas tax through electoral areas.
And looking forward?
So that's a bigger question, and that's what we've been, so we essentially have tried to establish funding through for some of these project-specific pieces throughout this calendar year, essentially. But the vision is that we have to come up with a longer-term kind of sustainable funding model, and that's been the challenge. So we've been petitioning the province, because as you said, that was what I was going to speak to initially, was that well, to be clear, that well licensing piece, that's a provincial mandate, and we're trying to help the local people navigate that process that the province has mandated. That being said, we're doing a bunch of the work that the province is supposed to be doing, essentially, there, right? And they've been helping with that, but they also, through conversations at UBCM with various ministry people at a number of different sessions too, I think they recognize how much of their work is being helped by what we're doing. And so they, you know, in terms of funding, we've been going to them saying, look, we recognize there's going to be a better arrangement for you as well as for us if we can make this develop properly. So help us. So either help us, you know, you figure out how to do that, whether that's staffing or whether that's financially, come to the table. And so we're still waiting on them to initiate we were supposed to have a meeting in December. That didn't happen, but we'll hopefully have a meeting soon with them and establish that. And then it's up to us through, you know, the City of Grand Forks and rural Grand Forks and the rest of the boundary local governments to try to figure out what that arrangement's going to look like in terms of sustainable funding moving forward. So that's the question. Then at that point, do we try to establish another service to the regional district? What does that look like? What do we need to get out of that? How does that relate to things like our agricultural plan as well? But there's a lot of questions to work through there.
And that encompasses your...
Yes, my initial was just to speak to that point to make sure it's clear that the well licensing thing is a provincial mandate that we're helping with. The province is quite pleased, and we've gone back to them and said, look, if we're going to do this again, because now it's extended, you should be funding this beyond just providing this staff person to those sessions. And so, and they haven't answered that in affirmative, but they have said. It sounds promising to me, basically. They haven't committed, but it sounds like they recognize the value here, I think, in terms of having a better partnership with a local body that is engaged with watershed management means that their energy is going to be more effective as well.
Thank you, Director Russell. Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, so just to be clear then, the 15,000 that you are requesting would be for the flood management part of the program. And then the other question would be, I'm wondering if you know, just off the top of your head, how much Grand Forks has contributed already to your program. May not be for this particular piece, but it could be to the Kettle River watershed management as a whole.
So lately, you guys put in $1,000 to kind of finish off the contract that the regional district had with me. So that was that $1,000 that you approved. It was because it was a 3-year contract. The money was put in place by the regional directors through the gas tax funding to cover that 3 years. But they didn't put in money for disbursements because they didn't know how much they would be. So the travel, meals, you know, any meeting costs, like we set up a meeting, you know, room rental, and we provide dinner sometimes. So the regional district always knew they'd have to go back and ask for, you know, maybe it was, I think, only $6,000 or something to put into that pot to kind of complete the contract. So that's what that $1,000 was. It was basically shared between you guys, Midway, the 3 directors, and Greenwood, which is great. And then you've also put the $1,500 into the drought management plan that's coming up, which was great because we really only, you know, we were asking water suppliers to help out, and anyway, it's good, yeah. But historically, I don't think a lot. Oh, go ahead, Graham.
Probably have the answer.
You do as well.
There was a flow-through grant from the RDKB, I believe it was in 2011. Flood mitigation, flood hazard mitigation stuff that flowed through the project and contributed directly to part of the Kettle River watershed plan. And then there was, I think, riparian threat assessment did have a couple of thousand, I think, from the city. Yeah.
The original one, the original contribution that Graham mentioned, I think was $10,000. Yes. So probably historically, other than the contributions that Jessica has raised, around $12,000. The bulk of the base funding has come through electoral area gas tax revenues.
Thank you. Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, another question. Just how do you think that people's general level of education is after what happened last year? I know I was down at the post office and there, it was really great. They had a lot of information posted on a bulletin board down there. I know the city was very involved in that. Bankheimer was down there a fair bit, and I know other staff people were too. So I'm just wondering, how you feel about the level of education of the general area as a whole, and certainly people who live in the area that was flooded.
I feel like it's getting better. I mean, Nicole spent a lot of time out at the, working out with the public, and we had repeat customers. People would come, and then they'd come back at another event and be like, "Oh, you guys are here too," and they'd have more questions. So I think people are getting used to seeing us. Well, I don't think we've been in the public. Graham was my predecessor, right? And so he did a lot of meetings and whatnot, but I don't know that you ran a lot of like public booths, that people could feel free to come and talk. And so I think that's been helpful. We've really only done that over the last year. So I think there's still a lot to learn probably for people. With the flood preparedness, I'd say it's better, right? Because people now are like, oh, I do. Some people didn't even know they lived in a floodplain because it hadn't flooded for 20 years and they only bought their house, 10 years ago or something like that, So that was, I think, kind of upsetting for people. But I'm still not sure how much they know about to be prepared. And there's other work I think to be done, like even thinking about your property. If you live in a floodplain, like what are you storing on your property? Because even we walked over the beach under the Black Train Bridge there, and there's these huge gallons, 45-gallon drums. They could have oil, they could have gasoline in them, and that's in the river system now. And so I think there's some work there to be done, like getting to people kind of think of what is on my property and can that contaminate the river if there's a flood again. And then also reminding people that even if a flood's not forecasted, it could still come, and we need to be ready, at a certain time of year. Yeah. So I think there's definitely room for education.
Thank you. You answered that really well. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Hearing none. Phil? Director Russell.
Just one quick comment too on some of these pieces. I think it's also important to highlight that the regional district now, so Jessica spoke a little bit about the activation of the Emergency Operations Center, right? The regional district also now, we have a manager for emergency programs, and we have a corporate communications officer. The titles they're new positions, so I keep stumbling on the title. So just also to make sure we're clear, there's distinction between those kind of acute education and response pieces and the more chronic, longer stand pieces. And so the trying to navigate and establish what those look like. So the difference between what happens when we're in a flood situation and we need to be educating and communicating versus what's happening in the months or the year prior sort of thing. So just to make sure we're clear that we're talking about also making sure that those communications all fit together and dovetail nicely.
Councilor Butler.
Thanks. Yeah, I think moving forward, it would be helpful for me, if it was possible, if you're able to provide to us the pieces that you're still going to be working on, how many years you see that taking, and your estimated budget for those projects coming up, so that we know we can see a light at the end of the tunnel to the funding request, and that we know overall how much the implementation of the program is going to cost. I also like the fact that we're able to have more local control over our watershed, that hopefully the province will get comfortable with working with you and realize that when we have issues that they can come to you and that you can take over for them rather than having them just implement stuff. Because you had mentioned to me that beginning of September, when they came down with that, oh my goodness, we're in a drought force situation, that they sent letters out to certain users saying you need to reduce your water consumption by 100%. In other words, turn off your taps. Like, wow. People just can't do that. And we need somebody like yourself at a local level that can implement things a bit more quickly and communicate with people. So I do like having you there to do that, and hopefully as we move forward, the province can allow us to have more freedom and more local control over our watershed.
I know that wasn't a question, but the only thing I'll say about it is that that's really what they've expressed to me, is that if we have this regional drought, response and drought management plan in place, that they will respect us, and that they can see that we're trying to cut back. And I said, you're going to stop sending those letters, like we show them that we are cutting back, voluntarily. And the other terrible thing about those letters is there was they misspelled, or they didn't misspell, they put in the wrong word. They sent these letters out to people and it said, you live in the Similkameen watershed. I was like, oh, if they only let me edit that. Clearly I would have seen that, and I could have fixed it so that, that just shows. I mean, who's gonna do that, right? Like if they get a letter like that, it's misspelled, it's from someone from the province from who knows where. Whereas if we're talking to people and trying to, plan ahead and get people on board ahead of time, I think it'll be more successful also.
Do we have any other questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion to receive for information from the delegation from the Kettle River Watershed Authority and refer the funding request of the $15,000 to the 2018 budgeting process. Councillor Ross. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 3B. Subject matter is the request to rescind the six-month eviction notice for 7212 Riverside Drive, Whispers of Hope. May I have a motion to receive the information, the delegation presentation from Whispers of Hope and Evidence Association. Mover, please, Councillor Ross. Good morning. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Melissa Scholga. I represent Whispers of Hope Benevolence Association. I am here requesting that the notice of eviction for 7212 Riverside Avenue be rescinded, and that the agreements of our original lease be adhered to, allowing us to stay until June of this year. You all likely know that we are a community kitchen and a thrift store. We are also a drop-in center and an advocate for those in our community who are most in need. In addition to the meals that we provide a space for qualified individuals to come in and provide services as a form of outreach to our citizens. We also provide employment and work experience opportunities to many people who are facing barriers otherwise to that. This has solidified ourselves as quite a safety net for the community. We're able to foster community connections with those who can't find them otherwise, and I think our services have become quite integral. We tend to act as a bit of a filter for many agencies to be able to provide support. Community donations, volunteer efforts, and service providers all come together to provide relief of poverty and harm reduction to those who are needing it. We actually have a diverse amount of supporters, many people in the community, food bank and hamper programs, the Resource Center, Mental Health and Addictions, Anchors, Community Futures, Blessings Boutique, the local Legion branch. We also have the grocery stores and many farmers all pitching in to provide whatever resources or support they can in the most meaningful way to ensure it gets to those in need. Our meal numbers for this last year have actually increased significantly, and we believe that the reliance on our services has become more important. We actually see some of our numbers correlate to other services being provided. So when income assistance or other food hamper programs are in place, our numbers actually do go down. And we think this indicates that there isn't a lot of abuse of our services, that people really do only reach out when they are in need. And we'd like to point out that we actually believe our area is going through a bit of a food crisis, and many other agencies involved would likely share the same concerns. We have costs of living increasing and little support available to people. I've also noticed through our socioeconomic reports coming out that many of our residents are experiencing worst case need, and we're seeing that on a daily basis. To give you an idea of the year for us, there were actually many large events and obstacles that we were faced with. Starting as early as April, we received our first concerns about the campers alongside the property. And we worked very closely with bylaw enforcement and whichever staff to ensure that pathways were maintained and that the property was clear. As of June, we actually had our coordinator of 5 years leave the position for another job, and that's difficult for any organization to navigate. And at that time, we actually believed that we were compliant with any and all bylaws and expectations because we didn't receive any other correspondence suggesting otherwise. In July, we experienced another change in management, and we also had some of our major food suppliers withdraw their donations. This was a huge impact on our operations. In August, we received the first notice to cease operations, and unfortunately, I think that has set a big tone with our organization and council as one of non-compliance. And unfortunately, our organization did see that 2-day notice as unreasonable and not compliant with our lease, and hence why we did push back. Otherwise, I'd like to stress that we have been working very closely to ensure that we are meeting standards and expectations in place. When we did receive the official eviction notice, it did give us a lot better insight as to the concerns being shared, although many of them were quite vague and led us to make a lot of assumptions. At that time, we had also already advertised that our bottle recycling bins were going to be removed from the location, and we believe that that added to some of the unsightliness being experienced because we were unable to deal with the volume coming in from that. At that time, we also did acquire permits for our storage containers and had them painted to ensure that they were, again, keeping up with sightly premises. As of September, I was hired, and that also allowed some consistency in staff to ensure that any donations dropped off after hours, any other messes could easily be handled in a timely manner, and we could keep up appearances better. At that time, we also believed that we were compliant with bylaws. In August, as part of the eviction notice, we were told we had 30 days to comply with those bylaws, and without, again, having received any other correspondence, we thought we were sufficient in that. We also started working a lot closer with the Boundary Resource Center, formerly known as the Boundary Women's Resource Center. We believe that if we work together to find a location, we likely can provide services together and a more well-rounded service to our guests and clientele. As of October, with the Beth Shelter reopening, we actually saw a lot less pressure on those concerns to do with the campers, and they had a little bit more options available to them. And unfortunately, we had the passing of one of our dear guests, a citizen who was living on the streets in our community, and it rocked our establishment as well. At that time, we did have fire inspection done, and we worked very closely with the chief to ensure every aspect that we could was adhered to. We had a company come in and ensure our fire alarm system was in good working order, as well as our extinguishers. It was very difficult for us to find a company to come in and do service for our ventilation system, but I'm happy to announce that as of this weekend, we actually have completed that work and it has been signed off upon. So I believe we're totally compliant with our expectations from the fire chief at this time. And then lastly, in November, we did have another major supply cut off, which was our bread supply. But thankfully, it's given us the opportunity to work a lot closer with our local food bank, and they've actually stepped up. So any product that they're unable to use or that they've rotated through, we're receiving. So it's kind of fostered a stronger relationship there. In terms of the eviction notice given, I mentioned that there were bylaws suggested that we were acting upon and that we addressed what we could. There were some aspects such as noise and sounds disturbing the peace, allowing waste, spoilage, or damage, and nuisance and annoyance to adjoining properties. we actually felt very strongly, and in working with our neighbors, that those complaints were more attributed to the actual homeless camp and the behaviors of the individuals within it. And it is very difficult for us to manage or even mitigate any of those behaviors outside of our leased property and outside of our operating hours. I wanted to comment because we've had a lot of questions about what our organization does to reduce crime in our area. And I believe that even our existence itself actually alleviates a lot of crime out of necessity. When somebody is hungry, when they don't have appropriate shoes on their feet, they're less likely to shoplift when they are given an option to them. We also were able to reiterate to many citizens that we do have rules in place and expected behavior on the property. We have the same concerns as any public washroom would have in terms of potential for drug use. And we actually believe that by having people there and monitoring the washrooms, that we can actually confront people on behavior we think is inappropriate, and we can actually go further to guide them to what resources may be available to help them. What's amazing is our drop-ins on Wednesday, being able to have a professional there. I can consult the group about any shared concerns of behavior that's been going on, and somebody there is able to talk about what resources and alternatives might be available for those people. I found that incredibly helpful. We also had concerns brought up by the fire chief recently, and I hope that we've addressed those, and I can go into that further with him. And unfortunately, concerns brought forward by the manager of building inspections were not actually made clear to us. So I believe his walkabout was in October. He has some concerns to do with the electrical setup, and the only way we've actually heard about this is through public notices. And that's a bit of a trend, unfortunately. Oftentimes we only hear about these concerns when it's been made aware to the public, and there is misinformation. So it makes it a lot more difficult in terms of our public relations to clarify our situation when we're having to address it with every individual that comes to inquire. So I'd really like to work closer with the city to address those concerns and alleviate them, because many times it's a non-issue. Of course, I wouldn't be here today if we had a location alternative in place within the given timeline. We have many factors to consider, including square footage, available parking nearby, infrastructure, and utilities available to accommodate the commercial kitchen. And we've looked within the downtown core as well as out in the industrial area and as far as the recreational area, and nothing is proven to be suitable. We think that we are a bigger advantage now working with other agencies and stakeholders to find a location and perhaps to bring resources together to operate as one in the facility. So we would just like more opportunity to explore those and find something suitable. I think, we've been aware of our lease being up for several years, at least as far as I was involved on the board, and it's something that we've discussed, we've looked around at. Now, I wouldn't say we're looking more seriously, I'd say we're looking more frantically. And I'm concerned that we're going to make rush decisions and that, honestly, that our guests will suffer in that our services may not be able to be as robust or even cover the needs that are being experienced. I also just wanted to mention that there is a feasibility study coming underway through Community Futures talking about a community hub. So there's lots of work underway talking about not only the types of services we provide, such as a gathering space and a community kitchen for the public. We're needing those resources to be enhanced upon, to grow. So I'd hate for us to move backwards in the meantime. Again, this is mostly an invitation to work closer with the city. We would like you to be at the table. We can discuss which locations we're looking at, what's appropriate, talk about our strategic planning moving forward into the future. With our harm reduction efforts, our poverty reduction techniques, and our community support, I believe that we are creating a healthier community, and I would invite you all to be a part of that. So to reiterate again, Mr. Mayor, I would like to insist that the eviction notice be rescinded for the 7212 location, allowing us to stick to our original lease And I implore the councillors and yourself, Mr. Mayor, as stewards of this community, please help us to continue to help others. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I just have one question. I have a few other questions which I'll reserve for later after the councillors or anybody else has asked questions. You keep stating that you have made efforts to find another location. Where and when? Have you any documented places?
Yes, well, in particular, we were working with a realtor recently. I'm not too sure in terms of privacy of information if I should discuss all the locations. There are many available, even previous locations that we've gone into. I mean, I could definitely make these addresses available to the council outside this meeting for fear if there is any concern about sharing that information publicly.
And you've also stated about compliance. How long was it in the making? How long did it take till you complied, for instance, with the fire chief regarding the ventilation system? Mm-hmm. And you had stated that you were not able to find yet, it's come to my attention, that you were given different options by the fire chief. Mm-hmm. So how long did the non-compliance occur? What's the timelines?
The biggest aspect of the non-compliance was to do with the ventilation system. Every other aspect was addressed within the month that the report happened in October. And that was actually more to do with availability of services and contractors. We have nothing in our town or our local area. I actually did have an original date of November 17th booked to have the vents cleaned, and unfortunately the company was out of Nelson. They had withdrawn due to poor weather and being unable to come across the passes. I also reached out to companies in the Okanagan, and they had said that they have a different cleaning schedule that we would need to get upon, and so that they were unable to come within that timeline. Thankfully, just kind of scouring whatever resources I can, making calls, I was able to find one company that, although they were not taking new clients and don't actually have the capacity for that, given our situation of dire need, made an exception. And like I said, we're able to come out over the weekend, and I was able to have all that completed finally. It's not necessarily to say that we weren't making the effort, it's that there were very limited resources available to us for that professional service.
So at the 11th hour, after 2 months, you finally got it done, which means during those 2 months, you actually put this corporation at risk because we are the landlords. And if anything should have occurred, this corporation would have been at risk, i.e. legal litigation, which transfers to the taxpayers. Secondly, you put your own patrons at risk in that establishment for 2 months. This is a really serious concern on my behalf. You put your own patrons at risk.
I definitely understand and even share those concerns because safety is of the utmost importance to our organization. I believe that in the actions that we could take, the fact that I jumped on them so quickly should hopefully be a testament to my concern for that. And unfortunately, yes, given the period of time and where we weren't presented with any options, it's difficult to say because it does look like there was no action being taken, and unfortunately I can't really prove otherwise other than getting contacts and making phone calls. I think that thankfully, having reviewed with the contractor the situation and not really knowing much about our ventilation system, I was actually taught a lot more. The filters that we have in place right above the stove are actually installed incorrectly, but in such a way that actually catches all the grease from going up into the vents, and therefore requiring a lot more cleaning on our hand. So in some senses, it being set up inappropriately made it less of a fire hazard in the sense that a lot of that grease was being caught right in an area that we were actually able to clean and maintain. And I did inquire with the contractor to see, what level of risk were we at? This has gone far too long. What was the situation? And he said that of course it needed to be done. There was actually dust in the system, which was indicative of that, but the grease was quite minimal because of our setup, and we're working closely with him to get that corrected. and have implemented a very good cleaning schedule that we're sticking to. So he actually indicated that if there was a grease fire to have happened within that time, that it would do damage to our fan blades and not to any damage to the building at all. I know that's kind of a moot point at this point, but I just want to reiterate that we do share that exact same level of concern. We don't want to put anyone in harm's way, whether it be our staff or our guests, and we do want to work with you guys to ensure that the building is in a safe place to occupy.
Again, with all due respect, that is your perception that it was safe, but 2 months being in the industry is unacceptable when you're dealing with the public and public's lives at stake. Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. It's my understanding here that we are just receiving this request to rescind the 6-month eviction notice. We're just receiving this for information at this point. I think what I just would like to say is that as I've watched this whole scenario unfold, I'm very saddened by the fact that that it's become an adversarial situation as opposed to a collaborative situation, and I think that were information to be communicated, were people to be sitting down at the table and talking over the issues and concerns that both sides have, we could have really mitigated a lot of the bad feeling and the place that we're at now. I absolutely believe in Whispers and Beths, what you do for the community. Every community has people who are marginalized and people who are poor and people who are disenfranchised. And those people need help and support from the community. Unfortunately, what seems to have happened is that Whispers and Beths have aligned themselves, not because of anything that you've done, but just because of proximity, I believe, with the criminal element of the community and with those people who, because of mental health issues and those kinds of things, are scaring people in the community and also making people angry. And out of that kind of a knee-jerk reaction, I think people have lost their sense of compassion and just said, well, let's just shut this thing down. Now, we're going to be looking at a resolution that Councillor Ross is bringing to the table in just a couple of items down on the agenda, which will seek to extend to the 1st of May for Whispers to stay open. I don't know where that'll go. I have no idea what the other councillors, how they're going to vote on that. But I would just like to say that I wish you all the best. I know how I'm going to be voting, and just keep on doing the right thing.
Councillor Thompson, Councillor and Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Your Worship. My major concern is the electrical and the bare wires. And has that had an electrical inspection? Has the electrical inspector come and approved it? And can you provide us with documentation that it's been approved?
I'm not actually aware of any bare wires that would be exposed or a concern. Like I mentioned, the concerns that the manager of building inspection had brought forward were not actually brought to us, and I am not actually a professional on the matter whatsoever, and I would say we're more than open to having a professional come in, assess the situation, and guide us into the actions that may need to be taken to be appropriate. So it's my understanding that no changes to the electrical have been done since we moved in 2013, and I believe that was when we were referenced as having the last building inspection. It's been 5 years. I'm not too sure how regularly it's expected that a building undergo those things, but I would think that we should be held to the same standard as anyone else. And if there is a cost and we are responsible for that, then we'll do our best to accommodate.
May I just interject quickly? You mentioned that you are not aware of any work having been done, but obviously there has been work done. So my simple question to this one is, did you get permission from the landlord to do such work, be it with a professional or a non-professional? This is the main element, because being a tenant, you cannot touch anything on the premise without getting permission first.
I'm definitely aware of the situation, and I have confirmed with the Beth Shelter as well that they have not undergone any electrical changes to the building. So to be honest, I'm at a loss because without having an inspection done to confirm if there have been changes, and if so, what, and what needs to be done to correct them, it's hard for me to comment on the scenario.
Have those pictures been forwarded to you regarding the electrical work, to your board?
Sorry, no, actually, we were shared the agenda for today, and that's actually how I found out I was listed on the agenda. I never actually did receive any formal response from anybody, and I have not heard, the only person I've been in contact with has been the fire chief at this point.
But having seen the agenda, you have seen the documentation that accompanied with it. And at that point in time, you are aware of that there were changes because they were quite evident. Pictures don't lie.
The problem for me is the point of reference. I don't actually know the change because I don't know how it was, and I'm not able to indicate through those pictures that those changes actually were done by us. I'm not trying to argue that we did or did not do something. I'm saying that we definitely would like to look into and find clarity in the situation and correct it. We are on the same page.
To our CEO, then Councillor Ross and Councillor Brown.
Your Worship, when we got the report back from our current building inspector and of the pictures and that, and so the first thing I did was phone former building inspector and asked him whether or not he was aware of what had happened. And he said that when he provided the occupancy permit, he would have not provided that permit if the work that with the wires that were outside of the building or outside on the walls without the proper sheathing and everything, he would have never provided the occupancy permit at that time.
Yeah, thank you. Just to clarify, the wording was used as bare wires. It should be termed exposed wires on the surface. Councillor Ross and then Councillor Crog.
Thank you, Melissa. This story is not unusual. I drove across Canada this summer to see family as far as Cape Breton Island, spent quite a bit of time in some small towns in New Brunswick as well, Nova Scotia, Quebec, Ontario. And as I traveled across Canada, I scanned for CBC News because I'm a news junkie, and I found it quite interesting that I felt like I hadn't lived Grand Forks because I was hearing time and time again about issues around homelessness, growing issues around lack of affordability, addictions, mental health, and it's on the increase right across the country and indeed globally. I just sort of feel like this is death by 1,000 cuts for you guys. And as somebody who actually owns my own home and is a landlord, it's my responsibility to make sure that the place that I'm renting out to an occupant is up to code. And I find it a little appalling and confusing that we would punish you for occupying a building that we own and not having it up to code, and then asking you what you're going to do about it. It's our building, it's our responsibility, and you were given a lease by a previous council. You are occupying that, and what I find appalling and interesting is it's run by people who are paid pretty, not great salaries often. A lot of those people who do that work are women, because that's what we do, and by volunteers. And then we go after you. And we go after the most fragile people in our community. We take food off their plates, and we pull blankets off their bodies. I'm hoping that we can debate this today and make this decision. And I just want to thank you for the work that you do and for the people who work alongside you. And I also agree with you that when you take food off people's plates and you pull a blanket off their body, they just become more angry. So these are basic human rights. And just thanks for coming here, and thanks for the work you do, and for the people here today who are volunteers and for that organization.
Just a quick comment, Councillor Ross. You had mentioned that you found it appalling that as landlords, we should be responsible and not take it out on the tenant. Unfortunately, when the tenant does the work, the city cannot be responsible if we are not aware of what is going on in the premise. Secondly, this discussion today is turning into a social elephant in the room. We have to keep this operational. We are basing this on the lease, the contraventions, and the non-compliance. let's not deviate into the social aspect of this. This is not the intention of the city.
We have an OCP that actually includes the
Councillor Ross, you're out
social
of order.
element.
Councillor Crog,
We talk about a triple bottom line.
You're out of order,
People.
Councillor Ross.
Oh, well.
Oh,
So
well.
are we. Well, council's like.
You're out of order, I'm out of order.
Thank you. Couple of questions. I think the electrical, or part of it has kind of been addressed. In order to touch an electrical system, you have to either be qualified or have a permit, So somebody went and decided they wanted to put plugs in different areas. So they just wired it themselves, okay? Which is illegal and bad, and we all know that, okay? I'm glad to hear that the hood cleaning has been done. A note, and I guess my concern has to do more with insurance and that, because when the hood wasn't done, that could negate your insurance. So for those 2 months, if that was the case, then you wouldn't have had any insurance. Now, my question is, if you are granted retrieval, extension, whatever you want to call it, what is there in place to protect the taxpayers for the city of Grand Forks? I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about your insurance. Most people have insurance, and if you're running a kitchen, then, you know, if you poison somebody, if somebody trips over the steel, or somebody gets splashed, that type of thing, that's normal liability insurance, okay? That protects you inside your building. What protects the city from the building, right? So what have you, like, is it $2 million liability? Is it $1 million? Is it just that occupancy liability? Is there, like a lot of places will have $5 million and they will name the city as being protected by that. Anytime there's an insurance claim against the city, it can affect the taxpayers and stuff. So what have you got in place, and what are your plans when it comes to insurance? I'm guessing, and you could prove me wrong, that the insurance that you have right now is not adequate.
I'll speak to this as best as I can. It's my understanding that our liability insurance is actually quite robust. We did renew our agreement a little while ago. Unfortunately, I don't really know all the details to those. I know we would definitely have well over $1 million in terms of liability, but you're right, I don't know the extent, 2 million, 5 million, what it is and what. I know that we did extend our coverage to include even more thorough, like, director's liability. So we've kind of gone a little bit further to look in, you know, where have we been vulnerable and how can we do better coverage. And again, I think this is a great opportunity for us to work closer with the city and their expectations. I would hope that if there was an expectation for our insurance purposes, that perhaps that be listed in our lease as something that we need to adhere to and to ensure this relationship. But I think this is something that we need to work collaboratively on. We don't own the asset of the building. We don't fully understand the true costs behind it, all kinds of things. So I think if there isn't insurance coverage on the city's part, and we need to make up for that, that we would work closely together to ensure that there is a system in place. Again, our organization's biggest concern is the safety of the workers, of the people who are in the building, anyone who's working around it, and definitely any damages to the property, whether it be the building itself or the contents within it. So it is my understanding that our insurance is sufficient, but I would share that information and work with you guys to cover anywhere where we felt vulnerable.
If I could just jump in on this one quickly, Councillor Butler, before you start. You see, again, repeating myself here, the element here is not the building, it's an asset. That is something that can easily be replaced. That is just a material thing. The concern here is the human beings and the lives. because the city has already experienced one incident, as you well recall. If not, I will relate it to you. The rafting incident that occurred over the falls.
I'm actually not aware.
Well, the city was also implicated in that case, which it was even not in our area, and yet still it cost the taxpayers. We had to defend ourselves accordingly on this situation. And this is an element where we do not want to embark on. This is not an avenue that the city wants to go down, because we are, let's say, the guardians of our taxpayers here. They are the ones that will be footing the bill should there be a major litigation cost. And as we can very well see, next of kin family will be the first to act should someone perish in that building. The building is irrelevant. That's a material thing. Councillor Butler.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, tough situation today. I echo what Councillor Tripp said earlier. As you know, when the MAPS project came to council at the beginning of our term, I was the only one that voted in favor of the MAPS project. I very much supported you guys throughout that. I spoke to council strongly in your favor throughout that project. I talked for many hours at length with your previous executive director about your patrons, about your work down there. I myself volunteered when you first moved to your new location. I shop there all the time. We've had a lot of concerns come to council from residents. I'm not going to lie. There's been a lot of people write in with extremely serious concerns. A lot of those are in camera, and I can't talk about them. But what really did it for me was the day that I came in shopping, and you guys were both at the counter, and a known drug addict came out of the bathroom and told all of us that she had just done pills in the bathroom. She went to high 10 my friend, who had the presence of mind not to touch her hands, because if she'd been doing fentanyl, that can kill you. And nothing was done. I talked with you guys afterwards about it, and I heard you mention harm reduction. And it's my understanding that you're okay with drug use in your facility. From what I saw, there was nothing done when drug use was in front of all of us. There was nothing said to this person. And that's a real concern for me, especially when it comes to liability for the city, that if drug use and fentanyl use are being permitted on those premises, I cannot be in favor of keeping it open. I'm sorry.
Can you confirm, by the way, it's come to my attention that the Friday before New Year's, there were apparently 2 to 3 overdoses at Whispers. Can you confirm that or deny that?
I cannot confirm that. I don't know of that situation being the case. Whispers was actually closed until January 2nd. On the Tuesday to Friday prior to that week, we did offer the kitchen services, but that's only open from 9 until 1. We didn't have any incidences at that time. In December, I know we had a few close calls and some scares where the Narcan kits were requested. In one case, one was administered, in another case it wasn't. And again, those were actually outside of our operating hours, but because we were around and present, we were able to help address them and be there before first aid responders were able to attend. So I don't know about the specific instance you're talking about. I have heard about your concerns, Julia, in terms of a known drug addict. Unfortunately, I think the individual you're referring to actually has severe mental health issues due to trauma.
Yes.
And primarily that person's behavior is a little erratic, and it's not necessarily able to attribute to particular drug use or just depending on the lucidity for the day. But that individual says many outlandish and absurd things all the time. Now, I'm able to confront these people on their behavior and correct it. But again, having said that, without witnessing it, and like you're saying, if an individual says, oh, I took my medication, I was just taking my medication, that's why I'm taking so long in the bathroom.
That's not the word she used.
It's pretty subjective. That's my recollection of the scenario, unfortunately.
Again, as a landlord, that is a massive risk to the corporation. Should something happen to that individual, again, family and next to kin, they always go after deep pockets, i.e. the city. Councillor Ross.
I just find it interesting we're having this conversation about drug use. There's a lot of filibustering going on, talking about wiring and vents and drug abuse, when we actually also own Gallery 2, which is an expensive building and is occupied, where they serve alcohol. They have wine tasting nights and liquor, lots of liquor. And we don't ever talk about what's your insurance, what happens if somebody drinks too much, and I've seen it at the wine tasting and falls down the stairs. We don't have that conversation because I guess those people can afford to pay $70 each for their wine tasting tickets. So if you're dressed up and wearing earrings and high heels and consuming vast massive amount of alcohol in a city-owned building, that's okay. So I'm just finding this a little bit hypocritical that we are talking about how much insurance do you have? What about people taking antipsychotics or something in your bathrooms? And we're going after you. All of a sudden, we've been sitting here in council for almost 4 years, over 3 years, and now we're really concerned about your insurance and what's going on in your buildings. We've never had this conversation about Gallery 2, where we own that building, and they consume a lot of people go there and they consume large amounts of alcohol, but they're all dressed up, so I guess it's okay. I find this highly hypocritical.
I find it a very sarcastic comparison, Councillor.
It's not it's
Councillor Thompson, go ahead.
Thank you.
There's nothing I can say today that you
Had
snipe at me.
we been aware, or had I as a councillor been aware of the issues, particularly with the wiring, and I'm glad you've remedied the ventilation, I would not have supported police. I would have wanted to see the building vacated immediately. I don't care how much insurance you have. The thing is that it's not going to be worth the paper it's written on if the insurance company becomes aware or is made aware of the condition of the wiring. And I am not prepared, quite frankly, to put the taxpayers of this community at risk. I fully support helping people. My husband and I have fully supported the Whispers of Hope with many, many donations. We did a purge this spring, and much of it was good stuff went to the Whispers. But I cannot ask and put our community at risk. I'll be perfectly blunt, I will not be able to support the resolution to extend your lease. I think that there are other places and other ways of achieving the objectives that the Whispers wants to do. I think it's an excellent organization. I have nothing against the people who work there or the people who use their services. But having said that, it cannot and should not be occurring in a building with facilities that are not safe. And I see that the Whispers of Beth's is here, but they haven't been asking for any extensions of lease. It's strictly the Whispers of Hope, and it's the Whispers of Hope portion that really, really concerns me. And I hear you that you've made efforts, but I think that there are other ways and means. I see Tammy Battersby sitting in the gallery, and I think that the Gospel Chapel has a fully serviced commercial kitchen. And until such times as you could find a location to do your meals, I think that there are ways around that. Perhaps you could rent that facility from the Gospel Chapel for the short term until you find another place. If you're concerned about people accessing and being able to come to get the meals, I think there's enough volunteers that would be able to come down and pick those people up and take them and serve them a hot meal. Conversely, there's perhaps the potential of serving a hot meal and putting them in serving dishes or whatever that can be taken down to them. There's creative ways that this issue can be dealt with, and probably you wouldn't have a great deal of difficulty locating for your thrift store. You may have difficulty in locating with a commercial kitchen, but that would give you time to look around and to come to a conclusion, and hopefully a good conclusion. But at this point in time, I personally cannot support having a facility that's, quite frankly, my husband is an industrial electrician, and I showed him the pictures, and he said, "Oh, that's not legal." And so I can't support that.
Just a quick interjection here on that subject matter. Are you aware that BC Housing has a backup plan in place for funding in regards to putting people up in motels, et cetera, and other contingency plans? Were you aware of that?
I'm actually not fully aware of all the options that are available to do with housing, because our company actually doesn't deal with housing. We deal particularly with food, providing essentials, and providing a gathering space where people can get support and learn. I suppose I'm just curious at what role the city plays in this. We keep talking about liabilities. Again, we share these same concerns. But we talked about how, it's taken us months to clean the vent. And I'm curious why the manager of building inspection only brought up his concerns with our electrical now and not even to us. If he did his walkabout in October and identified this as being such a hazardous situation, I would have hoped that he would have made that information available immediately so that we can correct it. So while we ourselves are working and doing our best to bring everything up to code and be compliant and ensure we are safe, I believe there is a level of responsibility that we might not be seeing on your part as well as the city. So again, I don't want to lay any blame. I would rather just instead us work together to ensure that we are covering these things, because we share the same concerns. We do not want any person to be harmed. And furthermore, I'd say it seems that council is more concerned about the liability as opposed to the actual health and livelihood of the individuals who are at risk. And yes, that may be in our building to do with operations, and we have a responsibility not to neglect it, but as well, what responsibility does the city have to these individuals who may now receive no services, who may not have food, whose building may burn down and they no longer have clothing and blankets and the essential items to move on and live their lives. So you're right, we do have commercial kitchens that we may be able to rent. There are so many of our supporters that we can pull upon to bring forward whatever options we can. We are resilient, and we will limp through this, however long it takes for us to lick our wounds. We're an organization that's grown out of need by the locals for the locals. So I really don't see that going away until that need is actually satiated through some other means. I'm just worried that, in an effort to lose weight fast, the city's about to cut off its leg. We have become a very important safety network for our community, and to put us in a position where we might have to stop services is really going to exacerbate the suffering of those who are impoverished at the moment. So I'd say please consider the harm that may be done by those who won't be able to access our services.
Comment on that. I fully understand the social aspect of what you're conveying forward, because never once have I said I don't have a social conscience, but bottom line is here, when you had mentioned that the building burns to the ground because of the legalities and the possible litigation and the liabilities, my only hope would be if that building does burn to the ground, it doesn't burn to the ground with someone in it. And that is, again, may I reiterate so emphatically, is the main concern. And when we see basic violations and non-compliance issue, you said if you would have known, well, you knew about the venting, and you yourself stated, and I did the documentation timelines for you, it took 2 months. Something as serious as that cannot take 2 months. Myself, I'm in the industry. You do not leave something like that for 2 months. You jump all over it no matter what it costs. And even if you have to go to your landlord and say, we're short on funding, but we have to get this fixed because there is a potential risk here. Once the corporation knows that that risk is there, which was confirmed by our fire chief, we also risk the fact that our MIA will not cover us. So there, in a nutshell, is the whole concept of this meeting and what I'm putting forward. It is not about the social aspect alone, because I've never once said that I do not have a social heart for this. But we do not want to turn this into a social, because it'll become horrific if somebody perishes in that establishment which we own, or the taxpayers own. Councilor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad, and I know we should probably be hearing from Steve McGibbon too, but I guess why can't we give them a bit of time? I think Councillor Thompson had some good ideas about potentially trying to collaborate with some of the churches or other places in town. I know you guys have been looking because I've been hearing from some of your directors about actually specific buildings that he has named, that you've gone into. He's shared with me the reasons why those facilities have not been acceptable. Either there's been too many renovations required, or they're too small, or, I mean, there's lots of reasons why. So I know you've been looking in it. That has been ongoing for many, many months. I'm thinking, now that we all know what the deficiencies are, why can't we give you, we'll get those things done, like lickety-split, and then give you a little bit of time to get your ducks in a row, find another place, and then, you know, you'll be set to go.
Councillor Thompson.
I'm not prepared, quite frankly, to put the taxpayers' dollars into that building. When I talked to you, Louise, at the forum in December, I was basing the $50,000 for renovations on redoing the roof. Having read the reports prepared by our building inspector, it's well over $300,000 to bring that building up to code. And I'm not going to ask or put the taxpayers at having to pay for that. And so I think that I have proposed some alternatives. I even hesitate, quite frankly, allowing that facility to remain open until February the 10th or the 15th or 8th, because of the fact that we know, council now knows the condition of that building. And I think, council having known that, and if there were an incident and there were lawsuits, and we supported the continuation of that lease, we are personally responsible. The taxpayers could sue us. I'm not in a financial position to be able to afford that, I'm sorry. So I think that you and your organization and the wonderful work that you do and the services that you provide, you're going to have to relocate.
It's, by the way, Councillor Thompson, it's not just council that's aware of it now. Now it is public knowledge.
That's great, yeah.
So even the insurance companies, MIA, know about it. It's out in the open now. Gentlemen in the second, well, we'll call it the second row. Go ahead, sir.
I just kind of wanted to address your thing with BC.
Could you identify yourself, please, first, for the record?
My name is Steve McGibbon, and I'm with Beth's. I am the coordinator there. Your comment on BC housing, funding, motel rooms, and other alternatives. Beth's has nothing in writing from BC Housing. I was asked at one point to seek an alternative, but without a letter of funding, I can't approach a motel or anyone else and say BC Housing will fund this and insure it without that in writing. And if there's one thing I've learned about BC Housing, you want it in writing. And yes, of course, Beth's would like an extension. We have nowhere to put our people, and it's the coldest month of the year. So the next thing is these inadequacies of wiring and all that. Let's pull it out of there. We have to do something now, no matter what, right? So if there's bare wires just doing extra plugs, let's pull the plugs. Let's look for a solution, not a...
The unfortunate part of that is now it's public awareness, and because the city owns the building, it'll be at the city's cost to rewire it up to code should that occur.
Well, I don't know what to tell you there.
Well, I just told you what there is to tell me.
Okay, so...
Here's the answer. The cost again to the city because something was done without permission, without proper professional installation. And I have our CEO commenting on the BC Housing.
Your Worship, we, of course, the city doesn't have any control as to what correspondence or anything happens as far as BC House's commitment to the emergency shelter portion. But we did have a conversation as staff prior to Christmas, and they had advised us at that time that they were looking at alternative solutions and perhaps putting the folks that use the extreme shelter into possible motels or some other situation of what they have. But they did have some kind of planning in place that they were going to look at honoring until the end of the extreme weather shelter, which is March 31st.
Okay, you're mentioning a conversation, ma'am. We had the same conversation, and they did say that they would indicated that they would put up some funding, but nothing in writing. Nothing I can move forward with.
Well, I guess we got to start getting the pens rolling.
Good luck getting something off of them.
Well, not us, ourselves.
Yeah.
That's out of our control. That's in your department. Yes. Gentleman in the third row. That would be yourself.
For those of you that don't know me, my name is Andre Boric. I was the coordinator at Whispers of Hope for almost 4 years. I find it kind of interesting, actually, this morning that I had to be in town for other business while this meeting was going on, and I was told that perhaps I could bring some information to the table. I think personally, I've been listening to the conversation that we've been having, some of it here, some of it on social media over the last year that I've been away, and I think there's a lot of very passionate people about this particular topic of homelessness, addictions, mental health. And before I left, I was hoping we were going to be able to come to some sort of resolve to actually find a solution. And some of you will remember me trying to talk about the medicine hat model. I sat here today and I was trying to, because I knew I would leave. And I was hoping that we could come to the solution of really coming to some sort of long-term plan. But what we really have on the table today is that we're not going to be able to solve a long-term or develop a long-term solution here right now in this room, as much as all of us would like to. I know, Mayor Conrad, you talk about the social aspects of it, and that most of us in this room are here because we care about our community, we care about the individuals that are out there that are homeless. I don't think that's an issue. I do find it kind of interesting that all of a sudden we're talking about, fire extinguishers that haven't been checked and the wiring and this, and all of a sudden we're having this conversation, 3-4 years into this program, and all of a sudden it's the big, huge issue. Yeah. Personally, I believe that it's not actually the big, huge issue, as much as we were trying to put it. I think personally the issue is the social side. A lot of us are frustrated with the vandalism and the thefts and the troubles that we see, the people out on the street, and we know that they're not doing well, that we need to help them some way, but the question is we all don't know how, and we want to. Council wants to, Whispers of Hope wants to, Beth wants to, they want to help them. But what's on the table today isn't the big, grandiose, how are we going to save all these people? What's on the table today is, should we shut down Whispers of Hope and the shelter on February 8th? I believe that's, or today even. And all I was going to say is, I'm going to tell you a story. Last year, just after the shelter shut down, I went to work like I always do, and there was a young lady that was, shelter just shut down, it was a few days after. She was sitting in the chair next to the door to the shelter, wrapped up in a blanket, and she had a little heater underneath her, some little car heater that was plugged into my electricity, Whispers. And I thought my first mind, oh man, I can't was using electricity. And I said, oh, it's cold. And I knew she was cold. I walked in, she followed me, and she must have heard that I was pulling in. She said, can I use the bathroom? She went to the bathroom, she turned the hot water on really quick and put her hands underneath it. A few seconds later, a few moments later, she was screaming in pain and agony. Her hands had really severe frostbite. She was trying to warm them up under the sink, and it just caused extreme pain in her hands. I grabbed her hands and I tried to warm them up, and I'm like, do you want to go to the hospital? I can bring her to the hospital. She's like, no, just give it some time, give it some time, give it some time. And I'm like, okay, but we'll give it some time. I'm trying to warm her hands. I noticed her hands are like really rough from being on the street, right? And I was thinking about the whole situation as I was trying to warm up her hands. It's like the door's locked. A week ago, she was staying in the shelter. She was fine. It's not unlike the situation that we have right now. We're thinking of locking the door. And what we forget is that These are human beings. And we wouldn't treat animals that way. We wouldn't, it is a social issue, and I understand that we're fed up with some of the crap that's been going on in our community. All of us are. But to shut the shelter right now, and to shut the soup kitchen right now, is not going to help the situation. What you need to do is, yes, we want to make a long-term plan. We want to get together with the transition house in the city and all these, the fire department here, Fenske's here. We were all talking about a long-term plan, but we can't get there today. What we have to decide today is, do these people that need these services have the right to have a decent place to stay and sleep and food in their bellies? Do they have that right? And I think that all of us that care, which we all do care, would say yes, they have that right. And by shutting this down, we're not serving them, we're not doing anything to them. And I want to just add one little thing, and this is the part that hurts the most to me, and I get passionate about it. That young lady is not with us today. She died this summer. And you know where she died? She died while she was still living on the riverbank. And I remember the day that I heard that she died, and I said, you know what? We can do better. We can do better than letting people of our community. She's a long-term Grand Fork person. We're not talking some transient that came into town. She has family here. She's had family here. She's got kids. She's even had grandchild in the past year. I don't think you got to see. So I look at you, Mayor Conrad, actually, because you're the head of this is your town. You're the head of this town. So we've elected you in this position. We're asking you, lead the ship. Guide the ship. You have the influence. You have the ability to be able to say to your councilors and the people in this room, are we going to let our citizens that have been in this town for a long time die on the riverbank, or are we going to let them stay in the shelter until we find a better alternative? Get some food at Whisper until we find a better alternative. Shutting those things down is not going to help us. It's not going to make things worse.
The quick response to that, sir, is the fact absolutely not. They will not be staying in that shelter that is unsafe for human habitation. You had stated that all of a sudden we did not embark on this to single you out or to single out Whispers to find reasons to get, let me finish please, reasons to have you out of there. This is something because, like you said, of what's been going on in this community with the crime, with the drugs, red flags have come up. Because it's been for 3 years, 4 years under this condition with, let's say, the wiring, etc., that doesn't make it right. You were just fortunate that nothing has happened. But now, once it's come to the surface, it has to be dealt with. Again, may I say, this is an operational issue that we are dealing with here today. I understand the heavy, heavy burden of the social aspect. Fully understand. I have nothing in the smallest iota against homeless. I feel for these people, but not when you or yourself, this organization is subjecting them to a possible harm.
Because I was the one that was organizing any of the improvements that were being done in that building, and I was the one that was around when the fire chief and building inspector decided they wanted to come through for the first time 3 years into the lease, when some of these social issues started coming up. So I can attest to some of the things that you're talking about. I can comment on that. First of all of the work that was done when we first opened that place, probably $150,000 worth, was basically paid for by Habitat for Humanity, who I happen to work for currently. Habitat for Humanity, as you all know, is no slouch when it comes to building. They're not just some fly-by-night contractor. They've built 17 different units in this community, and they've done a great job at them, and I'm proud of the 3 that are going up right now, and they're doing it first rate. All the electrical that has been done was done with permit by local people, and I could get those receipts and those things done by certified electricians.
Up until occupancy, correct?
Even after occupancy. Andy Chapeau is one of my friends. He's a licensed electrician. He has done almost all the electrical work that was done after occupancy. He's a licensed local electrician in this community. As far as the hood range, and the hood range was inspected on a regular basis by Jason McIver, who is qualified to do so. It was cleaned on a regular basis. Yes, we were a little bit late this time around, okay? It was cleaned on a regular basis. The fire extinguishers, same thing. He's a qualified safety inspector of the fire extinguishers and whatnot, and he's been doing those checks on an ongoing basis. So all of a sudden, if we have an issue, and even if we do, I love what Steve is saying, even if we do, let's just fix it. You need to change a fire extinguisher? Whispers of Hope would pay to do that. We need to put some wiring in. We don't have to put the burden on the taxpayer. We at Whispers have a business that we can spend some money and get it up to code. We're talking about conduit on a wire. I mean, these are not of a plug-in that was added in after. Okay. Change the wire. Pull the plug out. That's what Steve is saying. Pull the plug out. Let's get it up to code. It's this heavy-handed shut the place down is because of the social issue. So you keep trying to separate the two. But the truth is this is not about dotting our I's and crossing our T's when it comes to, we keep saying, liability. We carry liability insurance. We've carried it for years. We've always carried it. We have to. Of course we do. Sure, it's a public thing that there's some deficiencies that need to be fixed. Let's fix them. Why not? This community is going to need, every community in the province is having the same problem. This community is going to need a soup kitchen, it's going to need a shelter, just like every other community does. You're going to all of a sudden say, no, we're not going to need it, we don't need it, we're going to shut it down, or we're going to transfer it around to someplace else. The location is a good location. I know that there's some passion behind the fact that it's next to the river and that it's a nice spot for maybe a park or something like that. But until we can come with a long-term plan, a long-term solution of actually getting these people, out of the shelter and out of the soup kitchen, shutting it down is just a heavy-handed.
Again, quickly, these last issues that you commented on in regards to the wiring, the hood.
Yes.
This is not why Whispers is closing. The initial lease termination was established in August. These are just latest add-ons. Remember this, please. Remember the history.
August of this year.
In August, exactly. So it has nothing really.
So why are we shutting it out in February?
Yeah.
That was already established with the 6-month agreement that came forward by council. Was a resolution of
We're not
council.
even fulfilling the lease. The lease that was signed 5 years ago isn't being fulfilled. It's being
I'm just trying to
terminated by
point out to the
city.
fact to you, sir, that it is nothing to do only with these latest issues. These are just add-on contraventions.
And
but
they're
the initial-
insurmountable in your mind.
Pardon me?
They're insurmountable in your mind, that we cannot fix those.
They're not insurmountable at this point, but God forbid should something happen, then they would be very insurmountable if during the interim. Councilor Thompson, then. Okay.
Just quickly, whatever decision is made is not going to be popular. There are factions on, let's work with these people, keep it open. There are factions that are saying, shut it down, it never should have been allowed to be here. And had I known in August what I know now as a result of the reports from our fire chief and our building inspector, I would have been extremely hesitant on even giving Whispers and Beth's 6 months. So regrettably, and there's going to be those that say I'm heartless, I'm not. But it cannot and should not be allowed to remain open and putting our taxpayers, many of who sit in this room, at risk. And, social aspect, yes, that's very important, but that's not the issue. The issue is, for me, is the condition of that building.
Get in the back.
I'm going to
and
let
then.
Louise speak first, and then I'll speak.
I just wanted to say, as the chair for Whispers of Hope, I find it very distressing that the first I heard of contraventions to the electrical system was on Facebook on the weekend. If that was a real issue that Whispers of Hope or Beth needed to address, why were we not informed that, hey, this is a real problem here? Why did I read that on Facebook on the weekend? Just asking.
It's a good valid question.
That is a valid question.
That's a valid question.
There should be.
I agree. That's a valid question.
Lorraine Dick, I am so disappointed in my council members. Most of you have made up your mind as to how you are voting before you have even listened to this report. I'm shocked and I'm saddened. And Mr. Conrad, I would really like to, oh, Mayor, sorry, what is the appropriate? Mayor Conrad, your position is as chairman. You are not the head. You should be asking questions and listening for the answers of these people and not continually forcing your opinion. Now, the other thing I'd like to say is there needs to be a timeline. When I rent an apartment or a house in Grand Forks, I walk through the house with my landlord and we do an inspection check. And when I move out, we go through that apartment or that house and we cross-reference and we see what damage I've done. Based on what I've heard, this was not done when the lease was done. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there doesn't seem to be a great timeline. What was the condition of this building when Whispers took on the lease? And then why wasn't they informed along the way? And then again, the inspection afterwards. These things need to be documented in a timeline.
Thank you for your comments on explaining to me how I should do my position as chair and as mayor, first and foremost. Secondly, when the lease was established, it was from previous council. You are now talking to present council. If that was not performed by previous council, I cannot comment on what previous council did. Furthermore, this is operational, and I will say this once again. Before being mayor and the CEO of this corporation, I am a taxpayer like everyone else in this room. And I have to safeguard that element where if something goes wrong in this community, I am the CEO and the mayor of all of my constituents, not just a certain faction. And nobody has pre-decided anything prior to the meeting. We listened to the delegation. So I find it very appalling that you would make a statement like that, but that's your privilege. Thank you. Gentleman in the back, and then the lady in the second row.
Okay, I won't go into the social activist thing. I'm definitely on their side, not on your side on this, but as a taxpayer, who would be on the hook if something went wrong? First off, in your first conversation with Councillor Ross, she was trying to point out that the city has responsibility, and you said, no, they don't. Well, liability determines who's responsible. Really, where does the buck stop? It stops with the taxpayers if something goes wrong. Therefore, ipso facto, you're responsible. So, if appealing to your heartstrings is not good enough, well, how about this? If you pull the rug out from underneath the support system for the homeless here in this town, what you're going to do is you're going to make it tougher on them. Now, problems that happen as a result of that end up with things that could be actionable in court by an insurance company, for instance. Anybody who's done a dance with the insurance company knows that they will look for any way to stop paying as much as they can and push that off onto somebody else. So, if the city has created conditions which make it unsafe for citizens and visitors in the city, and something happens, who's going to be on the hook for that? For instance, last year when the whole place turned into a tinderbox and we were really worried that things were going to burn down, and one or more of the homeless people were setting fires to keep warm in the middle of the night in the bush, and everybody was really scared. Well, okay, let's say you shut down Whispers and Vests and they don't have a place to go. How many more homeless are going to be starting fires just to keep warm in the middle of the night? And if that turns into a conflagration that burns half the town down, the insurance companies for those houses and businesses will be looking for who to pin that debt onto. And it'll definitely be on us, the taxpayer, because they will be able to point out from all of your deliberations that you put a stop to the things that were keeping these people from doing that, to to some degree. I'm not saying it's a guaranteed thing, but I'm saying from my point of view as a taxpayer, I see a liability issue there. Now, as far as things like you are the landlord, we are the landlord, and things have happened that we don't like, okay, if I rent my place out to a business that is capable of taking care of things and paying for maintenance and upkeep and doing everything fine, I expect that they'll do that. But if I rent it out to a struggling organization that's run by volunteers, that has problems making ends meet, and I turn my back on them for 4 or 5 years, should I be expected to believe that they wouldn't have done things in the meantime that I might not like? I mean, really, from the point of view of insurance companies, they would turn around and they say to you, well, how come you didn't come and help them? How come you didn't come every 6 months to find out whether they needed anything done or how they were doing so you could help them do their job better? No, you did what voters here do with city council every 3 or 4 years. They vote you in, and then essentially they turn their back on you, hoping that you'll do a good job. Until they find out you're not doing a good job, then they get all upset, and they want to kick you out. Gee, in fact, before the last election, when the fight for the water meters was starting up, I was at a meeting over in the senior center, and I remember seeing somebody I hadn't noticed before very loudly saying, well, then just kick the bums out. And guess who that was? You're sitting in that seat right there. You said kick the bums out. Council, previous council. And now you're saying kick them out. From my point of view, really, I would rather that you supported them as they tried to support people who are, we can't fix the homeless problem, it's everywhere, I understand that. But making it worse for them makes it worse for all of us. I mean, you have sharps disposal units around town. Why? Well, there's two things. You don't want people to step on needles and kids to pick up needles and get hurt, that's true. But also from a liability point of view, if you have sharps disposal units and somebody steps on a needle and sues the city, you have ammunition to say, well, we're doing the best we can. Are you not doing the best you can if you kick these people, these organizations that support these people out of where they are? That's my take.
I just have one rebuttal on all the statements you made.
Yep.
I would never, you better roll your cameras back again, because I would never have made a statement, kick the bums out. Even as a citizen, I do not talk like that. My statement was I would put a moratorium on the water meter program or stop it. Never kick the bums out. That's not in my...
Actually, Mr. Mayor...
Well, we might want to look at that one.
That meeting was actually recorded.
Yeah, okay.
I'm pretty sure I can look it up.
Yeah, look it up. Make sure it was myself that made that statement and not somebody else from the gallery. And
You
you
were standing
assume...
5 feet in front of me. I saw
Well,
you. So,
okay.
anyways, that's neither here nor there.
Councillor Ross.
I think Tammy
Oh,
was
sorry, Tammy.
Thank you, Tammy Battersby. I'm a community care coordinator at Gospel Chapel and also vice chair on the Whispers board. And I am a taxpayer and a homeowner here in Grand Forks. So I had a couple of things I wanted to mention. One, just to lay the groundwork. In the beginning of August, we were given a cease and desist, which was interesting because I didn't know that a city could tell nonprofits to cease and desist. And a 30-day eviction, which then, as a council, you decided to rescind, and you gave us a list of reasons and a promise that if we were in compliance with those reasons within 30 days, that we would be able to stay. So I'm assuming that our being able to stay the last 5 months is proof that we were in compliance at that 30-day mark. And so, we've come here today to say, hi, we're here, we're in compliance, and we'd like an extension so that we can continue to operate in compliance until the end of our lease. And it's not meant to be controversial. It's meant to be friendly. It's meant to bring about collaboration and working together so that we can continue voluntarily providing a service that benefits a city. And there are many ways our city is benefited by these services. Would a different location be better? I don't know. We've been looking into that. Some of the places we've looked at, mean moving anywhere from 1 to 5 businesses out. As a former business owner, I'm not interested in evicting businesses so that we can, have that much of a hit on our economic flow in order for us to survive when we're already in a building. I think that that's counterproductive. And then the other piece that comes to my mind is, give me one second. Thinking back to April, from the community care coordinator side of things, and another hat I've worn is I am trained to be part of the provincial emergency program, emergency evacuation site in the case of fires, floods, etc. And it's funny to me that I did not think at the time when the floods came up that we should have enacted a provincial emergency plan. We should have had an evacuation center for all parties that were affected by our floods. I didn't think of it, so I imagine many of you didn't think of it. As my understanding is, there was 6 or so homeowners that declined evacuation, but there was 13 people within the town that were displaced because of the floods who were hidden away, and we didn't know about them. So them and their tents and their gear were hidden away, and they were displaced when the floods came up. The number of totals, if you include the rural, 30 people. At the time, Gospel Chapel did a fundraiser to help people get their kits back, to set up. And still, like I say, I apologize. I didn't think to say, hey, somebody should set up an evacuation center. So ultimately what happened is all these people came up into town, and our city became aware that we have homeless. And then they also got to be front stage to some of the behaviors and difficulties and challenges of homelessness. And it's been messy, right? It's been messy. But it was wonderful to see those flood pictures and go, yeah, right. That's kind of what began this, was, wow, these people are there, they're on city trails. And we asked them to move. We asked them to move and documented it on several occasions. But we don't have authority over city trails, or public lands, or floodplains that belong to the government. We only have authority over the area that we leasehold, and we worked hard to oversee that authority. I understand Julia's concerns. However, there's needle tins in the library, in the bathrooms. So if holding us accountable for somebody maybe or maybe not using in a bathroom because we don't know for proof, then don't we have to hold all the bathrooms in town accountable? Like, it seems there's a standard here that's kind of funny. We do have many places in town that support people. As to the church, I'm happy, Councillor Thompson, that you recognize that Gospel Chapel would want to, and we'd be happy to help where we can in this situation. It is good that you know that about the church. How much we can help, I'm not sure. I certainly will take that to the membership. I'm one of many, so it's not something that I could just up and make a decision on. And it is interesting to me that you would make that decision for us, though.
I'm not making a decision.
I do want to thank you for taking the time to hear the delegation.
Councillor Ross and then Councillor Thompson. But Councillor Ross, can I just have Councillor Thompson give the rebuttal to that before you lose the train of thought?
I'm not going to leave it.
On this, okay.
I really appreciated with Andre. I'm both surprised and delighted at what Andre had to share. It's not what I expected to hear from him, and it's pretty much exactly what I was going to speak to when my motion is being presented. I sent my motion to Council on December 28th. And I believe that there's been a scrambling happening by sending over the fire chief and the building inspector quickly, and so that they could find other reasons to shut you down. Because what I heard from Andre Borak was all that installation was done to code. It was done by Habitat for Humanity. It was done by a licensed electrician. But evidently that's not good enough. The fact that you had a hard time finding a tradesperson in this town is not surprising. I had a leaking roof for 8 months, severe drywall damage. It took me so long to get somebody into this town to fix my roof, and they had to come back several times to do it right. And then it took 4 months to get my drywall, 6 months almost to get my drywall fixed. So, you know, it's not easy in this town to get somebody to come and do these highly skilled jobs. And then on January 4th, and I didn't see it right away, there was a report from our building inspector and the fire chief to say, what else is wrong? Like, you've complied, oh, but whoops, now there's this and this and this. So I think it's like no matter what you do and how you defend yourself, you're sort of hooped. And I agree completely with Andrea. What he has said is that, you know, this is a social issue. And it is our responsibility as leaders in this community, not just to take care of bricks and mortars and sewers and water lines, but to ensure that the most fragile in our society are cared for and we're covered. And we will be judged as a society and as a town and how we treat the most marginalized and fragile in our community. So that's all I have to say about that. But think about the date. On December 28th, they got that motion, and they've been working really hard to find reasons, practical reasons, to defeat that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ross, for throwing staff under the bus. Councillor Thompson, and then our CAO.
It wasn't staff.
It did not come from me, Councillor Ross, because I didn't even do anything.
You've been arguing me by email for weeks.
Councillor Ross, you're out of order. Councillor Thompson, then our CAO, and then Councillor Krog.
Just a couple of things. Tammy, I was suggesting that the Whispers could rent. That was my intention. If I didn't say that, that's what I should have said.
Thank you for that.
Kitchen in the Gospel Chapel on a temporary basis until they found a new location. And I think that there was a very valid question asked, and I don't see our building inspector here, but the fire chief, and perhaps he could address when the inspections were done, and I think you and the building inspector did them together. Were your concerns communicated either verbally or in writing, or both, to the Whispers, either executive director or their board?
Yes, in mid-October, my concerns were put forth in writing to the manager. The building inspector accompanied me on the inspection. A little bit of a miscommunication. He thought that I was going to put the electrical in my inspection. I thought he was going to provide an inspection report. So I did not put that portion of the electrical in my inspection. And I assumed that he had provided a report. I mean, we don't work side by side. Can I just say one more thing? As far as any improvements post the initial inspection when it opened, if it was a certified electrician, they were not to code. It is totally against code what was put up in there, and if that was a certified electrician, you might want to look at his license.
Thank you. Okay. I guess what the other thing I'm asking is that when the building inspector was there, and I'm assuming you did it together, were his concerns communicated verbally then to the manager?
I can't answer to him.
Can we ask our management to check into that, please?
Can I just make one statement here? Again, our fire chief was kind of put on the spot there, but to make assumptions that it's not to code, we don't have that ability, because even our building inspector would not be dealing with electrical. That is a provincial issue where you have a provincial inspector looking at that. So not questioning the fire chief nor our building inspector, but that's not in our domain as a local building inspector to look at the electrical. Gas and electrical goes under the province. So there would have to be some kind of certification issued by the province, a provincial inspector, which I believe now comes out of Kelowna. They used to come out of Trail. Being in the industry, yeah, it was Nelson Trail, but mostly Trail. Now it's out of Kelowna. So at the time it might have been probably Nelson or Trail, but in any event, just the fact that there is a element of concern by looking at the wiring is sufficiently enough to initiate an investigation on it.
And again, through you to our CAO, do you know whether or not the electrical inspector has been made aware and requested to perform an inspection on that facility?
Do you want to see it?
Your worship, I don't believe he has at this point in time. I think that by doing that, it would likely end up being the onus of the city that would have to make bigger repairs. Being that building inspection, doesn't have that under their purveyance, but they could actually have kind of an idea of what the cost would be, and it likely would have been, or would be, between $40,000 and $50,000 to change whatever was done in there. And so it doesn't go, even though the city did not approve of what happened in there when they provided the occupancy permit upon the lease agreement, and it was done after, it would still encompass then onto the city. They would say, okay, you need to fix this, and I guess at the point that the council would have to appreciate that when our fire department and our electrical, or our building inspector, went to inspect, it was not that you're going to go out and look for trouble. It was actually somebody that had come in with a complaint that had some dire concerns with the condition of the stove. And so that, again, is a response to a complaint. So when council looked at the lease, of course, we were looking at all the pieces of the lease. It's not to do with anything else at that point. And that's when we had the advice and said, here's the conditions of the lease. Whispers and Beth both met the conditions. And however, clarification, I think when Ms. Battersby spoke, is that there was two pieces to the letter, which was the compliance to the lease, and also it was the city hereby further gives you notice that the lease is terminated pursuant to section 30 of the lease after the expiry of 60 months of your receipt of this letter. To be clear, the termination of the lease under section 30 of the lease is effective even if you have fully resolved the aforementioned contraventions of your obligations under the lease within 30 days and under section 23 and 20 of the lease. So again, the city is dealing with the aspects of the lease as far as the letter that was delivered to the organizations on the 8th of August.
If I may just weigh in on that quickly, what our CEO just stated, and based on that, if the Electrical Safety Board was made aware of the situation, then us, the city, and the corporation and the taxpayers being the landlords, so to speak, we would have to bring that building totally up to code. That part I am totally knowledgeable on. It would have to be totally brought up to code, not just that wiring, anything. Once something was touched, it has to be brought up to present day code, which would represent an exuberant cost for the corporation.
If the corporation chose to
notify.
Yeah. But I see our building inspectors here, and so if I could just backtrack a little bit and ask, when you did the inspection with the fire chief and you saw some things that concerned you, did you communicate that verbally and or in writing to the Whispers of Hope manager?
Through the mayor, no, not at that time. I communicated that to our fire chief.
Thank you.
I believe Councilor Claude, you would speak to something on this issue.
Just a couple of things. Some of it's kind of been addressed. Mr. Borick's comments about the electrical and when it was done, and it has to be done under permit. So from what he said, it sounded like, oh, okay, a permit was taken out. If a permit's taken out, then it's inspected by an electrical inspector to make sure they adhered to the permit. And just from the pictures I've seen and my limited knowledge about electrical systems, you can tell it was done after the fact, it was done without a permit, and it wasn't done correctly. Right? So I'm not sure who did it. If the licensed electrician came back later after the install and decided to jury rig some sketchy plug-ins, that does not sound like any electrician that would actually be able to hold a license anywhere. So that was one of the things. The other is I'll go back to liability, and people say that you can't put money against suffering, that type of thing, that if you want to put them on a balance. And I think what the mayor had mentioned earlier kind of got lost. Example is, years ago, some rafters went over the falls, way out there, okay? The city of Grand Forks was named in the lawsuit because we had pictures in our advertising brochures that showed happy people tubing within the city. So trust me, if there's any kind of lawsuit, they will go through, and I can guarantee that the volunteers and the society or the benevolence, whatever, do not have the money to be able to defend themselves, much less defend the city. And if we did get hit with $5 million liability, there's, I don't know, I think there's 22,000 and something portfolios. I don't have $2,000 to pay from my property towards something that happened that I had no control over. So every taxpayer in this town could be seeing a giant bill if things went wrong. So my concern is, like I said, if there's any kind of an extension that the taxpayers are protected, the people using the service are protected, the people providing the service are protected. And as of right now, I'm not seeing it. If the wiring was all up to code, if there was extra insurance, all that type of stuff, that would meet the, not capital, but the opposite of the social, which I can't think of right now.
Operational.
Yeah, operational. And just as a human, as a member of our community, I drove by there on Friday to take my cat to the vet, and I saw a bunch of skis out front, and some people were happily shopping, looking at the skis. And right at the corner where the door is, the best, there was 3 gentlemen doing a drug deal. Right? Unless people just exchange dollars for small packets for a collection. Like right there, within, like just around the corner from people that were actually shopping there.
Did you report that, sir?
No, I did not. I have more concerns over my cat, sorry.
I can check that for you. We have cameras that record that spot.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Just to
Then
weigh
you
in,
know who I'm talking about.
just to weigh in, if I may, on the previous issue, which you had stated, Councillor Crog, that it was operational. Indeed, it is, and I think we're getting real off the deep end.
Yeah,
here. But as far as the electrical goes, I think we have to really be very cautious with our language to say that it's illegal, that it's not done to code, because we do not have the ability to make those kind of statements. But going back a bit on a couple of your statements, if indeed, I think the only element where the responsibility was on the organization of Whispers or Beth's, that if there was a certified electrician did the job, if there was a permit applied for, and if there was an inspection report done that it all passed, that should have been submitted to the landlord, which is the corporation. If nothing else, that should have been done. Whether it's illegal, that's not in our purveyance to say that, or to even speculate. It's not in our wheelhouse. That's not our job to say it's done illegal, or it's legal, or it wasn't a certified electrician. That's the only comment I have to have. But the documentation should have been submitted to the city, which is the landlord in question. And that was, I believe, not done unless we have that documentation. So we're kind of getting off the deep end. We're going down an avenue, perceiving that it's not legal, that it's not done properly. I think that's out of our wheelhouse. But if we pursue this now, then of course, everything will have to be put up to code, and it will cost the corporation money again. To the lady in the third row, I believe.
Hi, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Claudette. You'll have to forgive me, I'm a bit nervous. I've heard a lot of negative statements from everyone. You're gonna need best whether you like it or not. That's a need and that's a service that this town requires. Out of that negative statements that I've been hearing, I'm a success story. For me to stand up here and look at you in the eyes and say that this town needs it, I was in a car accident. Got flown to Kelowna. I came here hitchhiking on my crutches. Oh, I was starving. Had no place to go. Best was there. That kitchen was there. That food saved my life. Now, do I look like a drug addict to you? Do I look like an alcoholic? No, I'm a mother with 6 freaking kids. And yes, I am angry that you guys want to shut Best and Whispers down and you want to move. An eviction notice means get out of here. And I don't want to see that place leave. That place is needed. I'm very nervous right now because you guys are all professionals. I come from the street and I'm here to say, you know what? You guys got a home. I didn't have a home. If it wasn't for that place that give me a meal every day, it helped me get a place. My rent is $11.25. All in all, I paid $1,300 for a place. It's a 4-bedroom house. I would love to have a roommate, you know, somebody that I can give back to the community. That's what you guys are supposed to be doing, right? Giving back to the community. And you, Mr. Mayor, I've heard so many hypocritical things come out of your mouth that this guy should rewind that tape or that DVD and play it back to you. And let's see, you sound hypocritical. That's all I gotta say. I can't say anymore. Best is needed. The shelter is needed. That woman that Andre was talking about, that was my friend. And I'm a little emotional now because you guys all have houses. Why don't you go spend a week out there without your credit card, your bank card, your money, your place? Let's see how you survive. Sharps containers, they're needed because people are addicted. That homeless problem, start there. Start somewhere instead of saying, you know what, get the hell out. I'm sorry, but I've said my piece. I'm here as a friend and a person of this community. Grand Forks is my home now. It's my community. And for me to be standing here talking to you guys, that takes a lot of courage on my behalf. And I'm sorry, and that's because of this program right here and these women. Thanks.
I would respectfully ask the gallery please to refrain from clapping, or that's part of our policy here. Councilor Hammond.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody on council that denies that there's a need in this community. We recognize that there's a need. We know that we need to, we don't know how to fix it. There isn't a ready answer, and we're dealing with the powers that be that can try to put the resources together to help us make this work. We've reached out to the province in many different aspects, and we are working with the groups to try and find a solution. Right now, there isn't one. I know what's going out there right now. It says the city is kicking them out in the middle of the winter. Well, I think that's a bit of a misconception because the notice came 6 months ago. And what I find disappointing is that there hasn't been a contingency plan on either part, a backup plan. Now, I understand that Beth's is going to be taken care of. We've heard it through our CAO, directly from BC Housing, that there's money available to put the homeless into motels. So hopefully that's going to come through because I know that that's an absolute need. We need to get people off the streets and we can't have them out in the snow. I'm disappointed that, and I know that we certainly need the gathering place, we need a soup kitchen, we need the Whispers, we need the services that they provide. We can't have it there. And I'm disappointed that they haven't been working with other agencies or other groups to form a plan B. What are we going to do when we leave? Can we move in and work with the Gospel Chapel? Can we get the Christian Center involved? Can we get some of the other church groups involved? Can we have different days, rotating kitchens? Because we know that the churches usually all have kitchens. So I don't know what's been put into a plan B, but we're not making a decision now to throw you out. The decision was made last summer. And I know we're talking about the disenfranchised, and I know that there's people out there that definitely need our help. And I hate to see people slipping through the cracks. But the other aspect of our job is, and it's a much larger majority, is to protect the rest of the community. And we have had such a strong voice from the balance of the community to say, please do not allow this facility to continue where it is. We are creating too many victims in this downtown core. We've had too many businesses damaged, vandalized, and theft. We have business people that are broken because they have been violated because of the break-ins, because of the robberies to support drug addicts. And we can't say it's your fault that this is happening, but in the location where it's happening right now, it's attracting them into this area, which is creating a bigger problem for the residents and the business owners downtown. So it would be nice if we had solutions to fix all of this, if there was the proper counseling out there, if there was the proper outreach, and I know that this is being worked on. It's not there yet. But if there's another option after 6 months, like it's been 5 months now, that you could have worked with even temporary solutions until you find a permanent. We're not saying shut down these services. We know that the services are required. We're just saying that they can't be operated out of the city building anymore. So it's up to you, and we support what you do, but it's up to you to find a place to do it that isn't involving the city building that needs to come down.
Lady in the first row.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to our CAO, the issue of liability and insurance and who's responsible if something happens seems to be one of the central issues here today. So through you.
I mean, just could you identify yourself?
Oh, Kate for the Gazette. Sorry.
We know who you are, but for the record.
So that seems to be one of the central issues here. So through you to the CAO who can perhaps answer about the lease. I don't have it in front of me, but for instance, Gallery 2, when they have a liquor event, has to come before the city, request a liquor license, and one of the clauses, there's one on the agenda tonight, for instance, that says the city must be named as a third-party liability on that insurance.
Yeah.
So is that not standard in all city-issued leases? So would the city be named as, on Whisper's insurance to protect if something happens? And further to that, it has been mentioned that counselors, like Councillor Thompson, for instance, said personal liability for counselors if they allow this to go forward and something happens. Does council not have insurance to protect against that?
Your Worship, so as far as a lease agreement goes, there are certain clauses that go into a lease agreement, and it would be pretty much the same as any other tenant-landlord lease agreement, where a tenant has their own insurance that looks after the contents of what they have. As a landlord, we have the responsibility to make sure that when they've had a occupancy piece, that the city is satisfied that at that point in time, everything is kosher and correct. As far as liabilities from what Whispers and Beth have, it would likely not help out the city's piece should something happen, because they would have it only on their own pieces, and that's, like, I really seriously doubt if they have anything that says that it's city harmless. And again, as I believe Councillor Krog pointed out, it doesn't preclude when there is something as a significant accident that should happen. They will go, whoever it is that the incident happens to, or whoever's connected to that, it does come back after the pockets. And so your liabilities and different things are a little bit not codependent. They're totally separate. As a part of answering as far as the gallery goes, when they're looking for something to do for we do not issue a liquor permit. That is done through the liquor board, and I believe in concert with the RCMP, who provides that piece. What the city does is, because they are asking to serve liquor in a city-owned property, they come to council, and that is council's purveyance whether or not they allow that. But it's all contingent on getting permits. They just don't go there and say, oh, council, we're going to have a great big party. And, the chips fall where they may. There's certain things that have to be done in place, and they have to have services right. They have to be able to have the ways and means of advising if there's somebody that has, say, over-imbibed or whatever, that it would be no different than somebody that has liquor that they're selling in the bar, that they have a responsibility to not serve those individuals anymore. So I hope that answers.
Well, that was...
As far as the elected officials, there is an indemnification program in place, but always bear in mind, if that is acted upon, it still conveys back as legal costs to the corporation, i.e. the taxpayers. It still goes full circle, always. councillors are protected, but who's going to pay for it? Corporation, which in turn is everyone out there.
Okay, yeah. So a follow-up if I may. To use, so Gallery 2 was brought up as an example by one of the councillors. So yes, I understand that the city doesn't issue the liquor permit, but there's that clause in whatever appears on the agenda that says you must name the city as an insured on policy that they take out. So am I to understand that nothing similar would exist for Whispers of Hope? Like that comparison was already made during this meeting. So nothing exists like that.
Because tenant insurance is just public liability, not on the building. Councillor Thompson.
You know, this discussion is, I think it's been good. You know, it's gotten a lot of things out and people know where they stand. But one comment I have to make is that people are concerned about the homeless and shelter. And so I think it was announced the city and Beth had come to terms on a preferred location for Beth's to build their new shelter. I'm aware that there is a petition that has been put out. And it's interesting to see some of the signatories on that petition. Some of them are sitting in this room, and it's NIMBY, not in my backyard. And I just find that rather an interesting piece of information that I read. Okay, you don't want them in your backyard, but it's okay for your neighbors to have them there. So, just a comment.
To the lady in the front row, and then the gentleman in the back. He's ahead of you. Just 1 second, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of want to just comment on something that Councillor Hammett had brought up. And I hopefully that reinforces the underlying need here isn't just that we need a little bit more time to work out a plan, but that we need to strengthen our communication lines with council. One thing I tried to convey was that we did have options available to us, just not very good ones. We kind of have plan A through Z worked out as to if this, then that, because there are so many variables at play here. We are working with other agencies, both in the capacity of looking for a location to operate in together, or perhaps even to rent or use facilities from. So this is, again, something we're having to reiterate, but unfortunately, when these conversations are a public conversation, and we're trying to hash out concerns via Facebook pages or in the final hour when called upon, you know, we can be looking into these liability issues. We can be looking into whether permits were in place, who did what, when we're actually appropriately confronted with these issues. I'm confident that our organization could overcome any obstacle put in front of its way and do so in a safe manner, and one that does respect our taxpayers and the risks that they also have out there in these decisions. So in allowing us some more time in rescinding the eviction notice, I suppose we want a confirmation that we're not really doing anything wrong. We've brought forward the fact that maybe this isn't a social issue, maybe it is. When we look at timelines and we see the notice that we were given in August with the stipulations being made, they were very social issues at that time. There wasn't necessarily concrete evidence, and a lot of these things were very vague, so we had to, you know, work with what we were given. And as much as there's misinformation on the council and the city side as to what's being gathered, what's being discussed, the same thing is happening for us. And I'm sure you all know how difficult it is to deal with public relations and misinformation and trying to validate your position that you're actually doing your best to do your job. So I think really in the end, we both come from very similar positions and we have very similar needs. So I really hope that regardless of the decisions made today, we shall overcome, but hopefully we're able to strengthen this relationship, because whether it be the city and a nonprofit organization or a landlord and a tenant, there needs to be a lot more communication going on there in order to have a healthy relationship. And I hope we can do that. So thank you.
Gentleman in the second row.
How's that task force going?
No, you're not in the second row, sorry. Yeah, you're in the second row, or first row, actually, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
My reply to Councillor Thompson. First of all, I'm very disappointed that you made that remark about signing that petition. You know very well the background that my wife and I have in helping that meeting. So when you saw that signature of ours, why didn't you come and ask us? Because you know our feelings for the needy. The reasons that we signed it, number one, as you are aware of, and Councillor Krog, that lot that city has on that corner was obtained years ago in case there was a change in traffic pattern because it is near the industrial area. Number two, at times it is one of the highest traffic patterns there, and according to the council, the people that use beds, they're nothing but drug addicts. So when they're under the influence of drugs, they wander out on the street, and the way some of those logging trucks and chip trucks come roaring through there, they're liable to get killed. Is that maybe the reason you done it? To get rid of the homeless population?
Jesus.
I have to respond to that. I didn't mention anybody's name.
No, I know you did, but you sure were looking at me.
For you to make a statement of that nature is reprehensible. Not only to me, but to those who sit at this table and who are in support of that. And I would like to ask you for an apology on that, as I think it was totally uncalled for.
I don't think an apology is necessary. You didn't apologize either. And another thing, I've heard so much about liability here. What about the city's liability for letting North Ruckle flood last spring? Other years, other councils have brought in a pump and kept the water down. This, where is your compassion for your taxpayers?
That's operational, and council doesn't get involved in operations of staff management.
I just have one quick comment on that statement that you made, where you said that in that location it would be, and I quote, full of drug addicts, which I believe Beth's would take a little bit of offense to that, considering they consider their organization drug-free, or they do not condone using drugs within the organization. Am I correct?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, you're very correct.
So that was, I think, a bit of a derogatory statement on your behalf.
What he said.
And worse, sir, to have to say that we initiated that location with the intention of getting rid of drug addicts. That is a very, very, I cannot believe that. Being in the position that you were in formerly, that you would make a statement like that. Sorry, but I'm sorry. I call a spade a spade.
So do I.
Councillor Hammond, and the lady in the second row was before you, and I just...
Should I go first?
Yes.
I just wanted to say something regarding this, sorry. You say the location is an ideal place for, the city chose it in order to get rid of the drug addicts. I'd like you to know that Beth's came to the city with that proposal, with that location, and asked the city to donate that land. It was not the city's suggestion to say, here, you can have this land, put your homeless shelter on this property. They came to us and asked us for that property. So I just want to clarify that, because this is how bad dialogue spreads around town, and it goes viral. And we become the bad guys. We were asked if we would donate and work with them, and we said yes, we would be glad to. So they have come to us over the past 6 months. They have tried to solve their situation. They've started to solve their situation, and we've been working with them on that in good faith. So for a statement like that is pretty irresponsible.
In that case, I was not aware of that because I was told that it was the city's choice. And in that case, I will apologize.
I would just like to say to everyone, we are kind of running really behind. It is a passionate subject, and again, I must commend everybody in the gallery for how respectfully this meeting is going, considering the nature of this topic, but if you can, please, let's try to speed it up because we do have a long day. Go ahead, in the back.
Just hoping to redirect back to the issue at hand, which is Whispers of Hope is asking for an extension or a removal of the eviction so that we can stay until the fullness of the original lease. And so that was one thing. The other thing was, is it possible, now that we're all aware and it's been confirmed officially that there was photos taken of the wiring, etc., that we as a gallery see these photos? Can we witness these photos? Thank you. Where is this? Yeah, I don't know where this is.
Jake's boxes.
So this is the door into...
I think it's all storage area.
I don't know.
Where's the wires?
There's wiring.
Again, may I reiterate, it's not in our position to say whether this is to code or not, nor is it even our building inspector's prerogative to say that. We only find it suspicious because of the way it's done, because in a commercial building it should probably not be done this way. But the authority having a jurisdiction would be the Electrical Safety Board. But now embarking these individuals into this, they will definitely then make this all go up to code, which would not only be this wiring, but anything else in the premise. If your countertop plugs need a 20 amp breaker with a plug, which they do now to code, this I can certify to you, because being in the industry, I know that. All of this will have to be changed. We're talking thousands of dollars now because this has come to the surface for the corporation's cost.
Thank you for letting us view them.
I'm just making that again because it's becoming so operational. We shouldn't be dealing with this now anymore, right? It's turned into a political elephant. The gentleman in the back.
First off, my apologies to former Mayor Jake Raven for jumping on his opportunity to speak there. Yeah, my question was about the task force that was said to, in the summertime, you said you were striking a task force for this. I'm just curious, has that happened? What's it doing? Is it involved in any of these deliberations?
It's morphed.
Pardon me?
It's morphed into another group.
Morphed into?
Other groups.
Another group. There's other groups that are working together.
Yeah.
Okay,
so we have 3 people on council that are liaisons on that committee as well.
Okay.
All working to the same goal, but it's encompassing, like Dara, you can probably speak on that.
Okay, just so that people know, when you talk about task force last summer, what's happening?
No, it was not just a shot in the dark. There was a serious intent and initiative to do it, and it's still there. Okay. To the gentleman in the second row.
I'm Dave Ray, by the way. I'm also on Whispers boards, but there is some clarification. I'm not familiar with everybody here. But I grew up in the electrical trade, and I would, if you would please bring up the pictures again. I'd just like to make a few comments about them.
Okay.
Now, there's been some words used here about legal and all sorts of different things. What you are looking at does not pass electrical inspection. I can tell you the reason why, but it'd be a waste of time. On the right-hand side, what you are seeing are telecommunication wires. On the left, you are seeing electrical. Now, the way that is set up there is not, it will not pass, because it's supposed to be in conduit, not Lumex. We go to the next picture. This one is, once again, it is a plug mounted with a piece of Lumex, and it is supposed to be inside a conduit. Okay, the next one, please. This one here, it's sort of hard to say, but it looks like that the exit sign is being run, or something is being run off of the exit sign, which does not pass code. The other wire there, I'm not sure what that one is. The next one, please. And this one here, I can't speak on. I believe Tess can speak on this in regards to the occupancy sign. Thank you.
Is that what we're looking at? I thought we were looking for wires.
The element there on the Lumex cable, by the way, would be acceptable if it wasn't a residence, as long as it's above 8 feet.
Yes.
It's fully acceptable to use Lumex in a residential wiring, but not in commercial.
Not in commercial.
Exactly. It
Or
can either
industrial.
be BX or conduit.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. McGibbon, would you like to comment on?
Are we looking at the wires there in this picture? Is that what we're...
Yeah, no, we're looking at the occupancy load.
Okay.
Are we in compliance?
No, sir.
Thank you.
I'd just like to make a suggestion if I could. As a taxpayer, and I am a taxpayer for your information.
Your name, sir?
My name is Scott Davis.
Yes.
Okay. And I've been listening to this conversation for, the duration of what's going on. And a simple solution in my mind, as a taxpayer, would be for a win-win situation for you and everybody else in this town is to have our public works go in there and spend a few hours, correct this wiring, and be done with it. And let these people stay until their lease is up. Don't displace these people. Don't put them on the street, because you're going to create more problems than we experience at this point in time. And that's a given. And you know it, I know it, and everybody in this room knows it. That's all I have to say.
Public Works cannot address electrical.
Excuse me?
Public Works would not be able to address it because it has to be a certified electrician.
Your Public Works don't have a certified electrician?
If they have a certified electrician,
Well, then get them over there.
But don't make a statement, Public Works. We just can't send anybody in there to touch the electrical work. And if they touch it now, like
It's your building.
If they touch it now.
It's city building.
Okay, sir.
And I know this has all got to do with your perception and my perception. And I don't agree with your perception.
Thank you.
Because your perception has been proven wrong time and time again.
Thank you.
And we are getting tired of it.
Thank you.
And that's all I have to say, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have yourself a great day. Okay, unless there's any other questions, I'm going to put an end to this. Councillor Butler?
Yeah, I was just wondering if we could vary the order of the agenda to move the motion, Councillor Ross's motion up and deal with it now. It just seems like it would be disjointed to have another presentation and then get back into this discussion again. I'm not sure if that was done for a reason on the agenda, or?
I have no idea why it was presented that way. I need to be. Where's the
Your Worship, it just fell under the item section as per our procedure bylaw, but it's well within council's purveyance if they want to move it up to discuss it now.
Yeah, I'll put forward that motion to vary the
First of all, we got to finish this one.
Yeah.
So are there any other questions? Lady in the front.
Just on back a few topics here.
Please, if I may.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, just back a few topics. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Louise Heck. Just back a few topics where we talked about several different organizations and whatnot, a larger community working together towards some of these things. Are we referring to the Boundary Interagencies meeting? Mm-hmm. All right.
Yep.
This topic has pretty much taken over our interagency meetings for the last couple of meetings, which is a good thing, because we really do need to talk about it, and we really do have a lot of different people coming to the table and talking about it. Sadly, at our last one, for whatever reason, none of our councillors were available. We really missed you all.
I wasn't notified.
That's
I
right.
didn't know you had-
We didn't get a notice. You're not on the... Okay, I will speak to the person at Community Features that sends out the agenda to make sure that you're not missed next time.
So with all due respect, there's a bit of lack of communication there.
Comedy, yes. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Okay, this is about the last one I'm going to take, because we really are...
Speaking to the big meeting, not the last one, but the one before that was held at the regional district. It was made clear by Community Futures, and there was city councillors there, that they will not, they as the ones that spearheaded or created or developed the big meeting, will not allow the big meeting to become the task force. They didn't use those words exactly, but that they would want the big meeting to remain the boundary interagency group meeting, and they would want it to remain there for all purposes of all involvement. That they weren't opposed to a subcommittee, but to my knowledge, there's not been a subcommittee formed. So this is not the task force, and just so that you're aware.
Yeah, that was not the
Thank you,
intent
sir.
of when we made that statement, that this was going to be the task force that we were talking about, just so you're aware, but that was not the intention, that big was going, this is just one of the organizations that is also participating in this overall bigger picture that we're dealing with. Okay, now.
Having an idea like that is very helpful.
Voting to receive.
May I have a motion?
We already put forward the motion, you put it forward before the.
Yeah, all those in favor of receipt? Anyone opposed? So carried.
So I'll put forward a motion to vary the order of the agenda and move item 5A up to 3C.
And move 3C to 3D.
Yeah.
Okay. Over. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried.
Discussion.
Okay, but before we have the discussion, I'd just like to thank you for your presentation, and again, I'd like to thank everyone for being respectful in this meeting, because I know it could have got very heated, and thank you again.
Okay, discussion on the last, moving up the thing. I would vote for and agree to moving it up after a short break.
So you want
As I said, I have to pee.
That's the appropriate term.
Okay. I have to pee.
So we already voted.
Yeah.
Without discussion, therefore vote again.
So you said, announced to the world that you had a urinate.
Yeah, pretty much.
No.
Like to call recess, 5-minute recess.
Yeah.
Okay.
5 minutes recess, then we bring that up.
Okay. Take recess for 5 minutes. Let's call this meeting back to order.
Oh, yeah.
So now we've moved up item 5A up to 3C. And that would be the notice of motion. The recommendation is whereas Beth's and Whispers of Hope continue to provide food and shelter to many people in our community, and both agencies are in the process of actively seeking new locations from which to operate, but not yet been successful. And part of that is, which cannot be made a decision on, the recommendation is that council extend the time in which Beth's and Whispers of Hope remain in their locations until May the 1st, 2018. That is the inclusive part of the notice of motion.
So that is
So now,
to tonight's regular meeting?
that would require another motion, another resolution, council. So right now, we're just receiving the notice of motion. So all those in favor, it's kind of, we're worded wrong.
No, how is it worded wrong? The therefore be it resolved is, how is it worded wrong?
No,
No, the initial part, to receive the notice of motion. I'm not questioning that the actual recommendation is worded wrong, because you don't make a decision at the committee of the whole meeting. So it has to be referred, so now we're receiving the notice of motion.
I would move to receive and refer to the regular meeting tonight.
I second that.
You don't need a second.
Oh, we don't need
No. Okay.
But we can't deal with it here. We can't make a decision here, but we can.
But we don't
refer
have
that.
to forward it.
Well, you can vote it down. You have that option to vote it down. That's the motion that to refer it
But I
to
think
tonight,
we
but
have
if you
to
want to make
make
an amendment or another motion to refer it to a later meeting,
No, we don't have to, but that's, I think
That's the motion on the floor.
yeah, motion's on the floor, so I'm going to call the question.
Just speaking to my motion.
Go ahead.
There's been so much discussion, and I think because there needs to be a decision made one way or the other, that if by referring it to tonight's meeting when we can't actually make a decision, I think it's the only fair thing to do to both organizations.
I think with everyone present, I think it needs to be dealt with. Councillor Butler, Councillor Tripp and Councillor Butler.
Sorry, I'm just confused, because if we don't refer this to tonight's meeting, then it just falls off. But I just thought, for the sake of the gallery, everybody's here right now, probably expecting a decision. They probably don't come back, and I'm sure most of them would want to come back tonight and hear it spoken to, so I just thought deal with it now rather than making everyone come back tonight.
You can't do any decisions at a committee of the whole meeting, Councillor Bunker, sorry.
No, it's not just,
Yeah. Well, the decision on the second part of the notice. Councillor Tripp?
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, I just some additional information came forward over the break there, and I don't know if this is something that's possible, but it was suggested that there might be a provincial electrical inspector or maybe safety commissioner that could be called in, could be asked to come and inspect the property. And so if they were coming in to inspect the property, that would absolve us of our liability because we are asking for this to be done. And then were we to extend the, we'd be taking care of that. And then if we extend this to give them a bit more time, we'd be able to move forward without any liability to the city.
As I've already explained earlier in this dialogue we had, that if that was the case, if the Electrical Safety Board was called in, which is the authority having jurisdiction in this matter, then we as the owners of the building have the liability and the responsibility to correct everything and anything and bring it up to speed, which again will substantiate a huge cost.
And what if they were out by then?
Pardon me?
What if they were out by then? What if at
If
that
the building is not being used and empty, then there is no usage, so that does not fall under any parameters of any kind of upgrade to the electrical.
With respect, Mr. Mayor, we are debating a notice of motion to refer that notice of motion to tonight's meeting. And I think the discussion that's been occurring here is probably more appropriate for tonight's meeting, regular meeting.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilor Thompson. There was a bit of a deviation, so yes. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion is carried, and it will be at the evening meeting. Yeah, that's a late item. Okay, moving on now to item which now becomes 3D. Subject matter, Vienna Woods, Granby Wilderness, Jean Board nominee. Recommendation is the committee to oversee for information the delegation from Dayton and Granby Wilderness regarding Vienna Woods. Mover, please. Councilor Ross.
Hey, guys.
Good morning. Are you representative?
Yes, I'm representing for Jean. My name is Kimberly Maris. Can you go
There you go, you're on.
I was going to hear. Thanks for the ride this morning. We'll see you later. I'm going straight over to Whispers.
Good morning, welcome. Yes.
My name is Kimberly Maris. Jean asked me to come and read a letter for him as he could not be here today. Unfortunately, I did not get that letter. But I didn't want to leave and have nobody here, so I will just sit here. I'm not sure what to do.
Well, then we are basically done because there's the letter. Yeah. We have received it. I would just go do it. I'm going to call the question. All in favor to receive? Anyone opposed? So carried. Thank you. All right, moving on. There's no regional topics that have already been discussed. On there's more. Director
Oh, there's more.
Oh yes, there is more. My apologies. Correct. Main reason you're here. I thought all this time you forgot, because I did.
What you're doing.
Go ahead.
Yes, you absolutely may. Be my guest.
You can share mine.
Thank you. So I have a few things. My laptop battery is now died, so my notes are missing. But that being said, given how late it is, I think I will skip past some of the other pieces that I was hoping to speak to, and I would like to ask that our regional district CAO have an opportunity to speak to the transit issues, because that was a request from council, as I understand it, and that's an ongoing issue. So there's a couple pieces of it, and Mark will be able to, I think, illuminate a little more. But there's the actual bylaw that we are asking to expand the availability of tax requisition. But the bigger issue, I think, really is what's going on with transit and what does that future look like for our transit opportunities. So, if I may, go ahead, Spence.
There we go. So, council's asked that there be a regional district presence here to speak about a bylaw that was referred, bylaw 1660. It's a bylaw that the regional district board has given 3 readings to. It's an amendment to the service establishment bylaw to increase the requisition limit from $40,000 to $50,000 for Boundary Transit. Boundary Transit is a service that was originally established in 1991 with 5 participants, the City of Grand Forks, Area D, Area C, the City of Greenwood, and a portion of electoral Area E. The bylaw was later amended to remove electoral Area C, so currently there are 4 participants. The service provides transit service on demand in Grand Forks and Area D from 8:30 in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon, Monday to Friday. And then 1 day per week on Fridays, it provides a run from Greenwood to Grand Forks and back to Greenwood.
Can you slow that down for a sec?
Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to take notes. I was hoping that we could have maybe had this as a document so that we have at least time. So 8:30 to 3:30.
Yeah.
Monday to Friday?
Monday to Friday, yeah.
And Greenwood's?
Friday only. I could direct you, if for more information on that, the levels of service, if you just Google the Boundary Transit Riders Guide, you'll get all that information with respect to hours of operation, fares, everything. So at this point, since 1991, the requisition limit under the service establishment bylaw has been $40,000. We've run into a funding crunch in the last couple of years. Last year was the first year that the BC Transit and UBCN PTIP program no longer applied. It's the Public Transit Infrastructure Program, which covered some of the costs of the capital, the leasing costs of buses. So as a result, we are responsible for picking up all of those costs. Just to step back a bit, the Boundary Transit service is operated as a partnership between the local government and BC Transit. The regional district, as the local government partner, picks up 38% of the cost of operating the service. BC Transit picks up the rest. And then the operations of the service are contracted out to a third-party contractor, in this case, Interior Health Authority, which is atypical for most transit services. It's a private transit company or transportation company that's the third-party provider of those services. And I think for Boundary Transit, it speaks to the type of service or the nature of service, in that IHA is the contracted provider of the service. The service is in the Grand Forks area, an on-demand service. People phone and get an appointment for the buses to come and pick them up. There's door-to-door service and curb-to-curb service. Door-to-door is considered a service that's available to those people who have mobility issues and need assistance getting from the door of their residence to wherever they're going. Curb-to-curb service is considered the service for those who are ambulatory and can get on the bus themselves without much effort. So the problem is that we've run into a situation where we, through our requisition limit of $40,000, can't cover the cost of operating the service. Once again, the $40,000 requisition limit has been in place since 1991. Last year, to make up the difference, we used reserve funds, about $22,000 of reserve funds to make up the difference. And there was an additional contribution from electoral area D out of the gas tax revenues and from the city of Grand Forks as an operating contribution of an additional $7,000 and change. This year we're looking at increasing the requisition limit to $50,000 from $40,000, which we can do without going to referendum because we're increasing it within a 5-year period of no more than 25%, which is allowed under the Act. But that still won't cover the operating costs. So the first order of business is to increase the requisition limit by amending the service establishment bylaw, which the board has given 3 readings to. We're now looking for consent from the 4 participants, and we need 2/3 consent to move forward to adoption. If in fact that bylaw gets approved, that increases the requisition limit to $50,000, but looking forward at the budget, we're looking at a budget of basically $83,000. There's some revenue from farebox revenue, but we would be looking at an additional $23,000 in contributions from the participants to make up the shortfall that we have with our requisition limit. So we would once again be looking for an operating contribution from the participants to allow us to continue operating the service at its current service levels. And based on discussions with the BCDC, we're looking at other alternatives. For example, reducing the levels of service. So we've been in contact with BC Transit, and they're looking at some analysis for us in terms of the impacts of reducing the service in Grand Forks. For example, from 5 days a week to 3 days a week. And they are also willing to look at an analysis on the impact of increasing fares, because that's in the local government's domain in terms of determining what the fares are and what they should be. And BC Transit is happy to do some work in terms of analyzing the revenue impacts of an increase in fares and looking at price elasticity and trying to determine what we might expect in reductions in ridership versus increases in fares if there was a fare increase. So that's where we are now. There's quite a bit of discussion to be undertaken at the BCDC, the Boundary Community Development Committee table on this, but the Regional District Board is looking for consent on the bylaw to increase the requisition limit from $40,000.
Mark, I have a question for you in regards to the comment you made regarding the services and the terms of reference, because I remember there was a conversation at the regional table where it came up that one of the individuals has changed positions. We have a new position individual. Have we gotten any clarity on that yet? That was the main concern, I think, issued by a lot of directors.
We have, yeah, we've actually got a bit more direction. BC Transit's asked their transit planner to do the work we've asked in terms of determining the impacts of a reduction in service. So they're beginning that work. In fact, in my inbox today, I noticed there's a MOU request for us to sign for BC Transit to commit to doing that analytical work on our behalf. So at least things are moving
They're starting, but we don't know what it looks like yet.
We don't know what it looks like.
Oh, so any idea of timelines of when we will be seeing something, what it looks like?
No, I don't at this point.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tripp, Councillor Butler.
Sir?
Share a mic.
Yeah.
Mark's on.
Thank you, Mayor Connor. Yeah, if I can just ask Mark, you mentioned that there need to be 2/3 assent on this from the participants. I'm just wondering if you can tell us who has consented, or if anyone has, and then what the bottom line would be for us. I see this from 40 to 50,000. Will we just be asked to contribute 10,000, or are we going to be asked to contribute more to make up for part of that $23,000 shortfall as well?
First question, so far we've received consent letters from the 2 electoral areas, electoral area D and electoral area E, still awaiting word from the city of Greenwood and the city of Grand Forks. In terms of the budget, the proposed budget for 2018, I can give you a sense of the numbers. This is draft budget numbers, and it's based on last year's levels of additional contribution from Area D and Grand Forks. In 2017, Grand Forks paid a requisition of $18,752, and then an additional operating contribution of $7,671 for a total of $26,423.
That was last year?
Last year.
Okay, 26,423?
Yes.
Okay.
And in 2018, for the draft budget at this point, and this doesn't include the actual numbers, so it's very much draft, we're looking at a contribution requisition of $23,495, an additional operating contribution of $13,087, for a total of $36,582.
Thank you.
But also not yet knowing what kind of service they're going to be getting.
That's right. That's based on status quo in terms of levels of service. 5 days a week, 8:30 to 5:30 in the Grand Forks area.
Okay, but so we have no real knowledge of what could happen if, let's say, they cut services. Well, obviously this amount will reduce, possibly, but should their services be somehow necessary to escalate, it'll be higher.
It shouldn't be higher. We have had requests for higher levels of service, actually recently from a member of the public asking for 2 runs from Greenwood to Grand Forks, but considering the cost crunch, I'm assuming that the participants aren't going to want to increase the levels of service. As far as reductions go, BC Transit has said that April 1st is when they renew the annual operating agreement with the contractor, so Interior Health, and that would be the point at which they would need clear direction from the regional district in terms of whether we want to reduce service levels. So at this point, one of the things that regional district staff would like to do is engage in a dialogue with Interior Health Authority as the operator of the service, because I think they have the best sense in terms of the impact on the service and impact on the community of reducing the days of service from 5 to 3. So I think that would be a key discussion to have, because they know sort of the impact on the day-to-day users of that treatment.
And any changes also, if I recall correctly, there's quite a huge timelines when you change services for them to be implemented.
That's right. She had indicated 40 to 60 weeks for them to change the service plan at BC Transit.
They're talking almost a year.
Typical, yeah. By the time they because they've got to change the riders' guides, they've got to change their programming. There's a number of changes that they have to make.
So which means we could be embarking on a proposed budget amendment or increased costs, not realizing exactly where we're going to be at, let's say, almost in a year from now.
Yeah, without clear direction or information from BC Transit, it'll be difficult. It may be difficult to determine what the impact is of decreasing the levels of service for 2018. But as we move forward to 2019, we'll certainly have that better information.
Councillor Tripp, Councillor Butler, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Did you have a follow-up to your
Well, I had another question.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So the comment that I want to make is that we know that there are people in our community for sure who are very dissatisfied with the level of service as it stands right now. You know, they don't believe that, especially the what you call that curb to curb. We have a number of disabled people in our community who are really struggling, and we've heard very clearly from them that they would like to see improved services. A lot of those people, especially on the weekend where there's nothing, and they are basically just homebound and have no way to get out. So when they're doing this survey to find out what services, the decrease of services, what kind of impacts that would have on the community, are those people going to be able to provide some input so that their concerns and their desires are taken into account? Because they're the ones that are using it.
Yeah, I think it would be important to have some form of community engagement prior to implementing any changes to levels of service.
Director Russell.
Why don't you just use the other mic there?
Just very, very briefly, also to clarify, if we don't pass, if the City of Grand Forks doesn't, like, if we don't approve this bylaw revision, then we have to reduce service, right? This is make sure everybody's on the same page. Right now, we cannot afford the service, the current service levels, given the budgets we have.
So we're kind of in a rock and a hard place.
Well, I just want to make sure there's two pieces of this conversation, and so that it's clear that for council, that one part of it is the decision to approve this bylaw amendment, and then the other part of the conversation is what should this service look like in the future, and does that include either reduction or an expansion in service? And so, like those timelines that we're hearing quoted today from our previous, I don't know what the title is for Daniel Pizarro, but from his perspective, when we were talking about those expansions of service, it was more like 18 to 24 months that we would look at if we went through a potential expansion of the service. So the timelines are very long for changes to that service. But right now, the immediate order of the day is to make sure that we have enough money to actually deliver the existing service. And we have gone to BC Transit with that request to say, what would it look? How would we save enough money in that service? What kind of reduction options are available that would mean that we could afford that service, given something more closely aligned to what our current budgets are. So that's what this conversation is those conversations about service reduction are our requests. That's the City of Grand Forks, Rural Grand Forks, and other participants to say, what would this look like if we were trying to save some of the reduce the increase, basically.
But is the assuredness there for at least the status quo to stay in effect if we agree to these increases? Because it represents, quickly looking at it, almost a $10,000 increase.
There's two different pieces to that too. There's the so we are right now the regional district is trying to amend that bylaw, right? Again, reminding you the regional district being in this case the City of Grand Forks as well as Rural Grand Forks and other participants, in order to allow us to tax up to that $50,000 mark instead of the $40,000, right? The allocation of how much we contribute, respectively, those partners, is enshrined in the bylaw itself, right? So the relative proportion of those costs. We recognize that still will not get us where we need to be in terms of the amount of money that we need to support the service, given current service levels. And so there's an obligation then to get more money into that service that does not come from taxation directly. And so that's where those other numbers, right, through both gas tax as well as operational funds, that's making up that difference, right? That's also part of the conversation with Greenwood and Area E, is understanding when we get that feedback from BC Transit to be able to say, okay, how much use does that Greenwood run actually see? And that'll then be part of that conversation when we're all sitting around the table together to say, okay, well then if the City of Grand Forks and Rural Grand Forks were the main participants in that service, how much should we expect those participants in the service to contribute for that bump up, because it's distinct from the traditional, the typical balance of taxation like that.
So if I understand this correctly, to be quite blunt, we're being asked to agree to an increase, but we have no assuredness of actually what we're going to get at the end, at this point in time.
Right now, in order to continue the service that we currently have, we need more money. And that it has not come as a surprise. This has been on the 5-year financial plan for the last at least I think 3 years, that we know this is on the horizon.
Well, that's my concern, because it's been increased all the time. So now if we're looking at an 18 to 24 month timeline, even if we support this, we're not sure, but at the end of the 24 months there's going to be another substantial increase, because they're going to say we can't make it work.
It's not going to get any cheaper.
Yeah, well, that's exactly my point. Yeah.
But the question being also is that right now we have a service, and in order to continue that service, we need more funding.
That's understood. So there's no way of putting a cap on it, so to speak.
So just to follow
Councillor Tripp and then Councillor Ross.
on that, it's difficult to say that we want to pay for something that we're not even happy with the service as it stands right now, and yet we're being asked for even more money. I mean, I think that's probably what we're all dealing with. You're saying it's two separate issues, but in fact, what one issue affects the other.
Councillor Butler. And then Councillor Ross. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, I pulled up the rider's guide here, and the fares are incredibly cheap at $1.50 per ticket within Grand Forks and $1.75 to Greenwood. So, I mean, that's not on par at all with what you see in the Lower Mainland, although people riding this bus obviously are either disabled or elderly or very low incomes. So we're not dealing with people that can probably afford to pay more. So this is it's almost a free service being offered by the community to help those that are less fortunate, which is similar to what we're seeing with the issue with bus. It's all a similar issue, right? I mean, how much can the community afford to pay and afford to do to help? And we want to, but how much? And I'm just wondering if there's any way of doing a compromise of raising the rates and the city chipping in a bit more. Like, even if we raise them by 50 cents, how much would that... And I'm wondering if there's people that have free passes to this bus because of their disabilities, if certain riders don't have to pay. And also, third question, IHA, has it gone out to tender for any other people to do the service? I don't know if Silver Kettle, I mean, they have a bus, if they're able to do it, or anybody else in town that would like to get a bus and do the service for cheaper. Has it been put out to tender at all? Good idea.
The service contract is between BC Transit and the operator, so we're not involved in that process, so I'm not aware of what their procedures are in terms of seeking other competitive bids on contracts, so I unfortunately can't answer that one for you. We can review the fares. That's something that certainly can be done, and BC Transit has expressed a willingness to do some analysis in terms of what the impact would be on those fare changes. Currently, the fares represent, as you note, a relatively minor cost of providing the service. We got revenues in 2017 of $9,700 and 2016 of $9,400, so it's a little over 10% of the operating cost of the service. In terms of are there people who don't have to pay based on their mobility status or something like that, I'm not aware of that. Certainly there's no provision in our ticketing guide for that, and so I think everybody is paying their fair share. There is a pass system, a monthly pass system for the Greenwood run, but I think everyone else is paying the regular trip-by-trip fare.
Quick question, Mark, based on what you just said, is there any data to substantiate if this service is actually warranted, like as far as volume being used? Is there any data out there that can, in other words, now we can see why the high cost, because nobody's hardly using it. Like the old statement is, who uses a bus anymore?
Yeah, we do get regular data from BC Transit on ridership, and actually the door-to-door service, the subscription door-to-door service increased, I think it was about 11% last year, so it's significantly increased. The curb service decreased marginally, but apparently there is increasing demand for
so even keel are a little better. Okay, thank you. Councillor Thompson. And then Councillor Rose.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Am I correct in assuming that not only there's the requisition that you're requesting through taxation, but you're also requesting the municipality to contribute to the operations? So there are two components, like, is that right? So you're asking for, let's say, off the top of my head, $15,000 for the service, and then another $10,000 for the operations. 13. Well, whatever.
To cover the additional costs that we're not allowed to requisition directly for the service. In the past it's been $40,000. The actual operating cost of that service has been considerably higher. And similarly, if we increase it through the bylaw amendment up to $50,000 with a budget of $82,991 proposed for 2018, and that's largely, almost entirely based on the BC Transit contract that we have with them, it won't cover those costs. So the only other alternative for us to do that would be to increase the requisition limit in the bylaw above 50%, and that requires us to go through a referendum or alternative approval process with the community, which we could do, and that's a decision for the Boundary Community Development Committee, the partners in the service, to determine in the long run, do we want to increase it beyond that. This is a stopgap step, increasing it to $50,000, because we can do that with the consent of the participants without having to go to the community and the referendum process.
Director Russell?
I'm
sorry. Just if I may, because I'm speaking to your question. Just to reiterate, because I think the semantics are important, this is not the regional district coming and asking the city of Grand Forks for something. This is us as participants in the service, being the city of Grand Forks and rural Grand Forks, trying to figure out how to fix our problem.
Yeah.
So there's no request for something here. This is just simply, we know we don't have enough money in this, so we have the question is either we find more money or we cut the service.
Yeah, no, and I understand that. That's the way it would be better. I say the regional district because it comes through.
Yeah.
You know, the other question I have is how, and I probably should know this, but I don't. I can't remember. Well, how is the share determined? Is it done by population, assessment, percentage?
So it's done by assessment. So the entire assessment base of the City of Grand Forks, electoral area D, and City of Greenwood are used for assessment. And then there's a local service area that's a portion of electoral area E in the Greenwood area that's been assessed as well as part of the service.
Councillor Ross and Councillor Hammond.
All right, thank you. Councillor Thompson and Councillor Tripp did ask a couple of my questions, but maybe I didn't catch the answer. So I'm hearing ridership is somewhat up. What would the, okay, so what, you have to throw money at this to fix it. How much money are we being asked for? That's what I'm not clear on exactly. I see some percentages here, and I have another question as well.
In total for 2018, under the draft budget, it's $36,582 compared to 2017 when it was $26,423.
That's strictly
That's
That's strictly the city of Grand Forks.
So it's going up by
Grand Forks is our
it's going up by 10,000.
Yeah.
12,000?
10,000.
Last year was 7,000 for operational, this year it's 13 for operational, correct? So the operational has gone up 6,000, whereas the rest of it has only gone up 4, am I right? Or a little over a change.
Yeah. So like my concern is, recently we came very close to losing Greyhound bus service in rural BC, and several of us wrote letters to Greyhound and got to stop that service. And I know throughout the boundaries, Milkini, rural Kootenay region, that these services are really important, not just to people who are shut in, low income, but for young families who are also commuting, moms and kids going to the doctor's and going to grocery shopping and whatnot. And it is a concern that we further cut these transit services. So, $10,000 seems like a lot of money, but whether you use a bus or not, every jurisdiction funds their public transportation, and there seems to be more of a movement throughout British Columbia to fund public transportation. And then, is there anything we can do to better promote it so that more people are availing themselves of that service?
Yeah, in terms of promotion, that's one of the issues that would probably be good to engage IHA in the discussion on this, because they may find that it's described as is in terms of the usage of the service. We don't know that at this point, and whether there is capacity for additional usage. As I said, I'm just looking up the numbers here. Ridership increased 11% over the last year, with a 10% increase in passenger trips.
Yeah, so there's certainly an increasing demand for the service.
Which in turn, though, if there's even a bigger increase in demand, so also the increase in cost then what goes hand in hand because it's not being funded by individuals regarding fares. Okay, Councillor Hammond.
Yeah, I think it was last spring that we had a meeting, a transit meeting at Gospel Chapel with MLA Larson and Sunshine Valley Community Services, and several councillors were attending, and we discussed the concerns with transit in our area. What are the shortfalls and what's good, what's bad? And a number of suggestions and recommendations were put forward, and I know our MLA was taking that forward. And I'm just wondering, has there been any work, has there been any communication back? Do we know, is there any dialogue between transit and our local MLA in the province that is assisting? Because I know, she has been working on this actively, and then after that, she got involved with the Greyhound bus issue as well. So transit was high on her priorities, and I'm just wondering if she's been able to make any inroads with the province.
I'm not aware of any of those discussions at that level, so I don't know the answer to that.
Likewise, I just don't know.
Okay.
Quick question.
Councillor Butler.
Sorry, what's the total cost of providing the service for the year? Was that the 50,000?
Total for the entire service?
Yeah.
83,000 here. I can just pull it up. Is the budgeted amount for 2018 is 82,991 in terms of total expenditures.
That includes everything operational.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So almost 83.
Just seeing what our portion is.
As compared to last year?
Last year,
I have those numbers.
yeah, actually it was more last year, 86,333.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Last year, as I mentioned earlier, we utilized some reserve monies to offset the costs of the service. We don't have those reserve monies available to us anymore, so that's why the contribution is higher than it would have been last year, even though the expenditures for operating the service were higher in 2017.
So Grand Forks is paying about half the cost of the service.
Based on the
Pretty close.
Yeah.
Pretty close. Yeah, 36.5. Yeah.
So, if I may, if you look at the agenda for Boundary Community Development Committee, you'll see the drafts of a bunch of our budgets. So right now, since we're just getting into budgeting, so all of our regional district committees, whether they're like the BCDC or whether they're and all of them right now are the initial drafts are being presented. So if you want to look at those numbers, and so for example with that transit budget, you would see the first draft, and it would include it has all the backup pages that would show you how much the various contributions are, as well as what the expectation is going forward. So
yeah. I'm just wondering, is Grand Forks using half of the service, or is it a lot of people from Greenwood coming back and forth? Like, is Greenwood actually using more of the service than Grand Forks?
I think that it's very unlikely that that's the case, but we don't have a clear answer. They give us some of the ridership statistics, but they don't. That particular piece doesn't seem very clearly articulated to us, and that's exactly the request that we went to them to say is give us some more clarity on how much that Greenwood Grand Forks run actually sees. The part of the rationale that it's not going to be as large of a contributor to the total cost is just based on the timing breakdown, right? Like that happens only on Fridays, I think, correct?
It's a single run, a single bus.
Yeah, as opposed to the remainder of the service, which is 5 days a week.
What about rural Grand Forks?
Well, same.
Like, are they using more of the service than us in town? I'm trying to pass the buck, right?
Yeah.
Good on you.
So I guess
that's going to be part of the clarification we're going to get. Is that what we talked earlier?
I think we will get some clarification. The question of how rich that data will be is an open question. But again, so stepping back, given that there is a bylaw in place, then the relative contribution. So this is unusual in terms of this request. The the first order of business is to approve the amendment of the bylaw. That's not unusual for us through the regional district. The second piece of that puzzle, in terms of the other contributions, is a more unusual. We don't normally do that, right? Because normally we have the requisition to cover and whatever else is in that budget to cover that. So that piece is more unusual, and we've tried to keep that in line. The conversation has been to try to keep that in line with our relative contributions through the bylaw, through taxation, even though that's not directly, it's not being paid for through that same requisition allowance.
But the second piece is something we would deal with through our own budgeting process.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, again, I think there's lots of conversation that would be productive to have about what this service looks like. I mean, we had it at the Boundary Community Development Committee meetings. We've talked about, one scenario is to say, okay, we want to get rid of that service entirely and find some alternative to fill that gap in terms of local transit, right? And we can have all those conversations, but right now we also just need to get that bylaw amendment passed. And so,
okay, but here's the question now. We need 2/3 participation. So what happens to these numbers? Are they out the window? Let's say hypothetically example, Greenwood opts out. That changes everything.
No, so again, the way that we budget, we being you and Rural Grand Forks and the rest of the regional district participants, is so that bylaw has committed all of us to providing for this service. So there's not an option to say, oh, I as Rural Grand Forks, I'm going to step back out of this service unless we initiate a service and go through that process to either dissolve or give the opportunity to remove ourselves from that service. So it's even if, for example, Greenwood didn't want to go ahead with that, if the other three participants all agreed that it made sense, then that would still go forward. They would then potentially say, okay, look, they would give notice, sort of say we have an intent to withdraw, but that process takes a fair bit of time as well. So it's not, given how the regional district budgets, again, I'm sure you've heard this maybe too many times, but if we establish a budget for a certain service, that money can only be used for that service. We cannot move it to a different service. And the relative contributions are enshrined in the bylaw that creates the service. And so we do not have the flexibility to say, okay, let's say the City of Grand Forks thinks that transit is really important and they want to expand that. That's a very challenging thing to do without amending the service bylaw itself.
Do we currently have bus service back and forth between Christina Lake at all? It's only to Greenwood. Yeah. See, like, we have this ongoing discussion regarding what we need in transit. And I know it's a cost that comes down to dollars. But I mean, in the wintertime, it would make sense to put a run out to Phoenix Ski Hill, who desperately wants to have the patrons up there. And in the wintertime, shift it so that they're taking people to the lake, to the beach, right? For recreation purposes, we don't have any transportation. And for kids, teenagers trying to get around, it's a bit difficult. And I think that a service like that would be utilized. But we're talking about just not even being able to maintain our existing level unless we do major increases.
That's right. That's a challenge. And so, and that was part of the initial conversation that prompted some of the conversations with BC Transit some time ago. Was, for example, saying, okay, well, is there an opportunity for more fare box revenue if we expand the service, for example, to take a run that goes via Phoenix? If we've already got a bus going to Greenwood, in the winter months, is that a viable scenario? And that's where we got that feedback from BC Transit saying, which might be different now, because we have some different personnel in those positions, but where they were saying, yeah, you could entertain that, but just so you're clear, it takes us 6 months to get this done and then 6 months to get this done. And so you'd be looking at essentially a year and a half before, in the most optimistic scenario sort of thing, before you'd see an expansion to service like that, because they have their processes to go through. So
implementation would be a struggle, for say the least. Councilor Butler.
So I don't know a lot about transit in the Lower Mainland and other areas. Does the provincial government kick in any money for transit services, or is it always covered by the municipality?
Yeah, absolutely. BC Transit's involved in virtually all of the transit systems province-wide, and for our service, we're as a local government paying 38% of that. BC Transit is paying the rest of the operation and cost of that service.
So the 82,000 that it's costing to run the service, BC Transit is paying more over and above that?
Absolutely, yes.
Also, IHA is getting paid a lot more than 82,000 to run the service.
Likely so, yes. And there are the bus leasing costs and other associated costs with the operation of the service, administration costs within BC Transit, those sorts of things. But yes, that 82,991 that's budgeted for 2018 just represents 38% of the cost of operating the service.
Wow.
You'd never run a service for 82,000.
Oh, I know, that's what I...
All right. Garcia.
Your Worship, I think that there's some time sensitivity for a decision on this from requested by the regional district, and so I think that if council wishes, they could refer this as a late item to tonight's meeting to decide whether they want to give their consent or otherwise, and then that really gives something for the regional district to go.
That would have been my recommendation too, because they've obviously been here to present their case.
I'll move that we refer this to tonight's meeting as a late item.
Councillor Ross, okay. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried.
Other issues?
Anything else?
Given that it looks like it's 1:45, I guess the other piece that I was hoping to speak to a little bit is economic development, and since we're talking about transit service, the same. So with our economic development service, we're going through a formal service review of that service, and that essentially means we're going to spend the next little while really assessing, are we getting the value that we would like to see out of that economic development service, and exploring what those alternatives look like, and going down that path. And so we don't have to get into it today because it's been a long meeting, and it'll be an ongoing process. Part of what we have been positioning our economic development service to deliver or include was a regional advisory table, essentially. And I think that I've talked with you before about that, and the notion that we could have a group of actual stakeholders in the community that are invested in economic development be advising us as local government in terms of our economic development decisions. And so those two things are both happening kind of in parallel right now with our economic development service, where we're set to establish those regional advisory tables, essentially, or table. At the same time as over the next few months, we'll be looking at different scenarios for how we can deliver economic development service and how to maximize the value that we're getting out of that service as we look forward. And at our last meeting, we did hear a pretty, I don't know if those of you that know Terry Van Horn, she's the, what is her title, Mark?
Executive Director of the Lower Columbia Initiatives Corporation in the Greater Trail Area.
Yeah. And so she gave a very impassioned presentation about their model and how it works on that side, which has some certainly appeal to myself personally, but it's kind of it relies on an advisory table that is then composed of a bunch of subcommittees that are on specific focal areas to make recommendations. And so anyway, so that's maybe a conversation that it's not that time sensitive. We don't have to have it today, but next time maybe we can dig into that piece a little further.
Kate?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Roland Russell. Kate for the Gazette. This Economic Development Service, that's the BCDC, that's the service that they run?
So again, we budget by services, and so those service establishment bylaws dictate that. So it's not actually, it is what was the BEDC, but that's a committee, so it's the Boundary Economic Development Service, which is one of the services that is captured under the umbrella of our Boundary Community Development Committee. So we have a committee that represents, for example, transit service as well as economic development service.
Okay.
So it's the Boundary Economic Development Service that I'm speaking about now.
Okay, so where I'm specifically interested in intersection then is what does that have to do with our Chamber of Commerce that serves the boundary? Are they part of that service, or?
No, it's a distinct entity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? I guess we're going to recess for lunch.
No,
Staff reports.
Oh, yeah. Although we might be something for lunch.
Yeah, you probably know where it is now. Well, thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you.
All right, moving along to 5B. Which are the monthly highlight reports from our management team. The recommendation is that the committee will receive the monthly highlight reports from the department managers. Over, please. Somebody, anybody? Councillor Hammond?
Yep.
Okay, discussion. Councillor Butter.
Sorry, a couple of questions. Sorry. She needs to talk to you.
You can't go.
Under electrical, there's a bit of stuff here I don't understand, and I'm just wondering if it could be put in plain terms, what's happening with the reconductor project along Riverside, how that project is going, if it's on schedule, and I just wanted to comment, the snow removal's been great.
Oh, yeah.
I know you commented about that earlier, and you guys have had a lot to keep up with, especially with all the ice, so thank you for that. Under planning, there were 3 resulting inquiries about the proposed bylaw changes. I was just wondering if that could be commented on. That's it.
Mr. Reid.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the voltage conversion down Riverside Drive is going very well. So the contractors strung all the primary line and the neutral, so they'll just be tying that in this week, and it should be done fairly soon. We're happy with that project.
And the planning inquiries.
Mr. Watt.
Thank you, through the mayor. So yeah, I believe at this point, Peter Matheson's video has been seen over 450,000 times on YouTube, and Grand Forks Council has mentioned quite favorably, and we've been getting lots of inquiries passed either through Pete or directly to us about when the changes are happening. Some of these are very people actually are serious. I know of at least one land sale already because of it, even though we've advised, they haven't been passed yet, but a small lot residential property is in the process of being purchased with the intention of putting a very small cottage on it. So the inquiries are coming in, and they're resulting in, at this point, not a lot more work for the department, but it's new kinds of questions are coming in. And the final piece is that there's an inquiry on the way, I guess, just kind of forming about a larger development involving tiny piece. So more details coming.
Okay. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Trimble.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Councillor Butler's comments on the snow removal. You guys have just done a fantastic job. But a question to the fire chief. The fire was set outside the entrance of a commercial building. Was that arson?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Is it arson? Well, fires don't light by themselves. But no one saw the person's face. We suspect who it is. We would be fairly confident in saying who it is. But because we didn't have anyone actually see them, that was as far as we could go with that. Fortunately, it was just cardboard, and fortunately, it was lit on some concrete at Gospel Chapel in the corner, just outside there. Yes, and so and it ended up going up, and that's the fortunate part. We never got called to that fire. What we got called was the smell of smoke inside the building, and because it was by an exit door that didn't have a good weather seal, and so air flows into buildings, and that's what happened, and so that's where the smoke was. We did an extensive search inside the building. Had no idea that was outside the building until towards the end of the search, because we couldn't find anything. And then I think it was one of our crew said, well, there's something outside here, right? And then we found a neighbor that had said, yeah, we saw someone riding away on bicycle, right? But I said, did you see their face? No. Anyways.
Kate?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Trips first, sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, just wondering, I just was wondering about a property that's on 11th Street, and Graham, I don't know if you're aware of this property, but it has the main home, and then a small trailer that has a number on it that is 10 different than the next one over. It looks to be hooked up to utilities, and it's skirted in. So to me, I'm wondering if this is actually qualifying as a tiny home. Is it coming in? Has it been registered? Is it already in place? I'm just wondering what the status of that particular property is. It's on 11th Street on the west side.
Here, maybe I can.
North of Central?
North of Central. So on 11th Street on the west side of the street, north of Central.
That trailer was a temporary occupancy for a fellow who was building a house. It is now disconnected, to the best of my knowledge, and it is skirted in, yes, and he will be moving it in the spring.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question that I had, I just was wondering how things are going with the wastewater treatment plant, how things are going in that.
That would be you, Mr. Reed.
Yeah. Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the project's moving forward. The balancing tank is complete. Signed off on that piece. We're waiting for the actual building drawings and the electrical and the pipe work to be completed this next year. And we did order the centrifuge, so that was getting some of the equipment ahead of time because it has a long lead to it, so it's moving along well.
Good, thank you.
Kate?
Yes, thank you, Worship. Kate for the Gazette. Not to belabor the discussion about Whispers of Hope, but I'm looking here in the reports, and I see that under Human Resources there's a hiring of an electrical coordinator stated. And it was stated this morning that the city doesn't have the capacity to assess or do any of that stuff with the electrical. So I'm wondering what that role is and the function within the city.
Can't answer that. It's operations.
Sure,
Our CAO.
Your Worship, our previous electrical coordinator is no longer with us, and this is just the reinstatement of the coordinator position.
Okay, so that was a role that existed before?
Yes.
And what does that role entail typically?
They coordinate the electrical.
So that would be electrical projects or?
Your Worship, of course, most of the projects that the city does is through the lineman and the electrical utility itself.
Mr. Reed probably gives a bit more insight on that one. I believe it was Mr. Zielinski that was previously that way.
Correct, yes. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the electrical coordinator deals with the high voltage. So the electricians don't have that same training, or it's a different ticket.
Okay.
So it's a power line technician that we have, or PLT. So they just deal with the high voltage and secondary work.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Councilor Thompson?
Yep. Because through you, linemen are not qualified electricians. It's a totally different course, so they don't have the same ticket. It's a different, you have
category.
Yeah, totally different category. So they could not go in and start to rewire a building because they don't have those qualifications.
Yeah, well, just the position title is a little bit vague, so I just wondered about the relationship between, I know the city does have a utility.
No, I know, but I just wanted to clarify that just because we refer to them as the electricians, that doesn't mean that they can go in and start doing wiring.
The coordinator would be a form of a foreman, right, in the electrical department, in other words.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any other questions? Seeing none. All those in favor to receive? Anyone opposed? So carried. No reports, no late items. Item 12, question period from the public. Do we have any? Hearing none. Oh, we do.
More of an observation, just for your information, that little device there that I was playing with, it's also working with a little device on the there. You've been live streaming all morning. Except for a small amount of time when I had to change the batteries on that thing. And just so you know, in this first 3 hours of the meeting, 212 times people came to watch it, and at one time there was up to 50 people watching simultaneously. It's a very, very contentious subject. And one little thing, the electrical thing, just reminded me of something. Did you know that Ontario Hydro spent $9 million designing their bills, and they want to spend 6 more? That would be $15 million for their building. It's mostly the back end stuff, but I'm sure we don't spend anywhere near that much, do we? Anyways, you're live.
Thought you were going to tell me you found that tape.
Oh, I did, but I haven't been able to listen to it.
You must trust us, Les. No comment.
No. We'll deal with it in camera.
Yeah.
No. All those, motion to adjourn. Councillor Thompson, all those in favor?